Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto takes the Yondaime's Fuuinjutsu. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. Safely tucked away in the comfort of their beds, the majority of Konoha's population had no knowledge of the events taking place so late at night. For those still awake, all that could be seen was the mysterious fog that was looming about, obstructing the sights of all. A silence had descended upon the sleepy village, allowing the sounds of the patter of running feet, clanging noises of metal upon metal, and the whistling of whirling shuriken to be more pronounced. It was then that a body fell from the sky, hitting the ground with a satisfying thud. The man's body refused to move despite his mind desperately willing it to do so, and he lay helplessly as death claimed its next victim. "Rat, collect the body while we pursue. Everyone else, stay with me," bit out the purple-haired female Anbu, apparently the captain of the squad. The Anbu code-named Rat broke formation and jumped to the street, only to receive a kunai to the throat. Shit, the female Anbu jumped at the man with full speed and slashed vertically with her sword, intending to slice the man's body in half. She tensed halfway through her attack, however, expecting a counter because the man was calmly awaiting her attack. However, no such thing happened, because her sword went straight through the man, whose body dissipated as she went through it. Bunshin no Jutsu, E-grade ninjutsu, creates an after-image with no physical attributes. Also, the ninjutsu needed to pass the dismal genin examination at the Shinobi Academy. With sufficient practice and chakra, even a civilian might be able to do it. What the fuck? A bunshin barely existed. A bunshin couldn't even fool most genin. A bunshin couldn't fucking shove a kunai into your comrade's throat. As impossible as it is, it seems that he switched with a bunshin, using the kawarimi no jutsu. But it shouldn't be possible to use the kawarimi with a non-solid object. Rat. The Anbu captain crouched near her comrade, codenamed Rat. He was already dead. After whispering a silent prayer, she stood tall once more. They would have to approach the man with utmost caution. Hokage-sama had informed her that the man was only of genin class, but that his abilities were easily of the Junin level. He did not inform her. Junin or not, she would still have to kill him, and retrieve the forbidden scroll he had stolen. Another Anbu team was up ahead at the village entrance, in hopes of catching the man off guard. She, and what remained of her team, would have to be quick in order to execute the pincer tactic to trap the man. "Let's go." The man being chased, whose name was currently Jensei, abruptly turned the corner. Counting 2 seconds, he threw a shuriken behind him at approximately 10 degrees above his line of sight. The lead Chunin giving chase unfortunately turned the corner right into the shuriken, which intently lodged into his brain, cutting off all functions of life. The nameless Chunin fell to the ground, dead. Jensei smirked. "Poor bastard." The other Chunin followed, all with the purpose of avenging their friend. All 4 of these Chunin would die. Jensei was on a veering path to out of the village. He had to first go to his established safe house, where he would meet his accomplice. From there, the two would be able to find a safe exit out of the village. "Well, Naruto-kun, I guess I'll be able to give you one last lesson," Jensei thought wryly. He picked up his speed and ran in the darkness of the night, to where one Uzumaki Naruto resided. Naruto looked at Jensei, taking in his bloody clothes and cuts that he received from kunai and shuriken thrown at him. With him, the gray-haired man carried a large scroll. So large, in fact, that it was bigger than Naruto. Jensei, a Konoha shinobi, had volunteered to take care of Naruto a little while ago. Naruto did not fully understand why this man didn't seem to hate him, but still recognized that the man had no intentions of harming him, or so it seemed. The current Hokage was one of the few people in the village that didn't bear a grudge against the young blonde, so this man most likely just wanted to get the Hokage's favor. Naruto didn't care about his reasons, and simply thanked the Jensei's actions, not his motives. He had proved trustworthy for now, and Naruto was thankful for that. When the Hokage introduced Jensei to him 3 months prior, Naruto had been immediately suspicious. It wasn't exactly hard to kill a 7-year-old and make it look like an accident, especially for a shinobi. Naruto kept his guard up at all times around the man at first. However, Jensei made no such attempts. He acted quite kindly toward Naruto, treating him with a certain amount of respect that the blonde had come to enjoy. He even took to teaching him things that he would learn at the Shinobi Academy and beyond, basics such as chakra molding and hand seals, more advanced things such as anatomy and torture methods. Slowly but surely, this caused Naruto to drop his guard, no longer doubting the man's intentions, only his motives. He eagerly listened to the lessons, learning techniques such as Bunshin no Jutsu, Kawarimi no Jutsu, and Henge no Jutsu all before the age of 7. He could probably graduate the academy at that point, but Gensei said there was no point in entering him. Recently, Gensei had decided to start teaching Naruto a rather uncommon shinobi art called Fuuinjutsu. Fuuinjutsu was used mostly to seal items into scrolls to ease travel these days, but Gensei, who seemed quite knowledgeable on the subject, had explained to him that Fuuinjutsu was much more than that. Through the use of different symbols drawn in different mediums, Fuuinjutsu could control, channel and manipulate chakra. With infinite possibilities of different seal arrangements, a well-prepared Fuuinjutsu specialist could very well be the most dangerous ninja to come across in battle. Most ninja decided against using Fuuinjutsu in battle because of the immense preparation and precision needed to execute the complex art. Even for masters of the art, it could take too long in determining how to accomplish a specific task. Even with the advanced preparations complete, the actual inscription of the seals took time as well. Either a lull in the battle or advanced preparation was needed to effectively use them. Once the initial plan has finished, the specialist would be open to enemy attacks until they could make more seals. Though it was said all too much, in a battle between shinobi, 1 second could mean the difference between life and death. It was much quicker to kill an enemy with a kunai or with a ninjutsu than it was write out an intricate seal and use it to kill an enemy, and most ninja took the easy way out. However, the idea of controlling chakra fascinated Naruto immensely. His creative and keen 7-year-old mind went over all sorts of possibilities involving Fuuinjutsu that he thought no other shinobi had ever thought of. It was for this reason that Naruto had convinced Gensei to teach him whatever he could about Fuuinjutsu. Normally, the old man would just teach whatever he decided was appropriate, and Naruto had listened, enraptured. "Well, kid, this'll probably be the last time you'll see me," Gensei said, chuckling lightly. Naruto was not surprised. "What do you mean, Gensei-san?" Naruto said, sounding surprised. Gensei observed him, as if sizing him up. "You're a good student, Naruto-kun. But, unfortunately, if I stay too long in Konoha, I'll get killed," said Gensei. "Ah," thought Naruto, "I see. Killed? Why would you be killed? Konoha doesn't kill its own shinobi." Gensei eyed Naruto for a moment, still feeling slightly awed at the insight that the blonde showed. The boy was young and still prone to mistakes like any child his age, but he was the type to not make the same mistake twice. The blonde's curiosity spoke of a trained mind, and even now it showed. Naruto had obviously figured out that Gensei was not from around Konoha. It was remarkably easy for him to sneak into Konoha and pose as a genin. As a Junin-level ninja, sneaking into the village as a civilian was an easy feat. Once there, he only had to steal the identity of a look-alike. He had found an older generation genin, and secretly watched him, learning of his habits and friends and the like. When the time was right, he struck, killing the unknowing fool, and becoming Gensei. He spent a lot of time around the Hokage, trying to get into his good graces to gather information. By befriending Naruto, he had gained the Hokage's trust and discovered the location of the scroll. He almost felt bad for betraying the old man, but it had to be done for his village and for his revenge. Gensei came from a small shinobi village, one of many that had almost been destroyed by Konoha during the Second Great Ninja War. By the end of the war, only a shadow of the former village remained. Faced with poverty and sickness, the village's very existence seemed threatened. To save the village, he sought the most valuable ninja artifact in the village, the Forbidden Scroll. With the scroll, he could learn the techniques and become a better ninja to protect his village and earn money. But unlike some of the other artifacts in the village, when he finished learning the techniques he could sell the scroll to another village for quite a lot of money. "Spill it, kid. How did you know I wasn't a Konoha nin?" he questioned. Naruto regarded him seriously for the first time. Konoha doesn't try to kill its ninja for no reason. Gensei chuckled once again. "Friggin' kid is good. I can't wait to see what he'll grow to be. Well, I have about an hour or two at most, so I think I'll let you go over this scroll once. Let's see. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Want to learn, boy? Gensei said. Naruto had no qualms about learning from an enemy. Kage Bunshin, an advanced version of the Bunshin no Jutsu, where the user creates actual bodies instead of after images. It's only a high-level technique because it can waste so much of the user's chakra. It should be perfect for him, especially with his shitload of chakra. Naruto looked over what would be one of his favorite techniques. 15 minutes later, 4 other Narutos stood with him, each indistinguishable from the original. Gensei looked on impassively. I wanted to learn some Fuuinjutsu. All 5 Narutos spoke in unison. Gensei just stared. The Anbu captain saw a Chunin on the ground. Dead. At least, in death, the Chunin told her an important story. Gensei had come this way. The Anbu team at the border reported that the Nin had not come that way. That meant he took a detour. She signaled to her 2 remaining Anbu underlings. I will kill you, was her thought. And the 3-man Anbu team followed the trail of blood of their comrades, left behind by the vicious enemy Nin. All I had for the next few weeks are in these scrolls. I prepared them beforehand to give to you, but I never got the chance. Gensei said. Naruto did not repeat what he said. Why did humans need to repeat what others say to ascertain truth? I see. Thanks. He meant it. Naruto-kun, why don't you come with me? There is still a lot I can teach you. It's not like anyone in this shithole village wants you here. Naruto eyed the man for a moment, considering his request. The whiskered blonde knew that the possibility of him having a better life as Gensei's student existed. However, there was more reason for him to stay. He could either be with one person who seemed to care about him, or he could be with a village that didn't care about him. But, he at least knew where he stood with the village. Gensei was a wild card. Naruto didn't want to answer. If I say yes, I'll get in trouble if we get caught. If I say no, he might very well kill me. He taught me everything I know, he gave me life as a ninja. He can just as easily take it away. Naruto never wished for an interruption more than at that moment. A purple-haired female Anbu burst through the window, followed by 2 others. There was only a single moment of hesitation and tension in Naruto's apartment before everything spurned into motion. An Anbu with a lizard mask blurred into action. He grabbed the forbidden scroll and threw it to the other subordinate Anbu, who jumped backward, narrowly avoiding a shuriken from Gensei. He took off into the night. The Anbu captain attacked Gensei once more with her sword, faster than Naruto could see, but Gensei dodged it with ease. But the other Anbu came from the side and attacked, only to trip through the bunshin that the older ninja had used for his Kawarimi no Jutsu. Gensei, moving too fast for Naruto to see properly, aimed to shove a kunai into the man's head, but the female Anbu captain blocked it with the flat of her blade, knocking it out of his hand. The kunai cluttered on the floor near Naruto. Gensei stopped the other Anbu's right hook with the bottom of his sandal and jumped, sticking his left hand against the ceiling of Naruto's bedroom. Moving his foot from the Anbu's fist, he kicked the blade of the sword into the female Anbu's neck, but she tilted body slightly, avoiding getting killed. Gensei grinned. It was exactly as he anticipated. Using chakra to make the blade of the small sword stick to his sandal, he swung his leg back into the side, driving the bottom of the sword through the mask of the other Anbu, hitting his forehead and knocking him out cold. Gensei, releasing himself from the ceiling, walked slowly over to the struggling female Anbu. Her arms not moving, she pushed herself back against the wall with her legs, trying to put as much distance as possible between them. But it was useless. That sword was saturated with my chakra. It has special properties that causes temporary paralysis in those affected. Gensei explained, as he picked up the fallen wakizashi. The Anbu horrifyingly realized that she could not move her legs anymore. His hand stretched out, and she shut her eyes, awaiting death. But it didn't come. Oh ho, quite the looker, aren't you? Gensei looked at her, a strange glint in his eyes. It's too bad I lost the scroll. I'll have to take it out on you. Azuki Yugo, now unmasked, glared at him. But she could do nothing as he grabbed the wakizashi once more, Gensei's paralysis preventing her from moving. Naruto-kun, watch closely. Gensei said cheerfully, gripping the small sword in his right hand. Holding the flat against Yugo's pretty face, torture and interrogation is important for a shinobi to learn. There was no answer. Naruto-kun? Gensei suddenly felt a stab of pain in his back. The sword slipped from his hand, and fell to the floor. He turned around, facing Naruto, who was facing him, shaking. Yugo saw that he had a kunai in his back, crudely inserted into his back. Naruto, he gasped out, you little bastard. Gensei's hands reached out to strangle him, his usual quickness lost to anger, but his hands went through. Kawarimi with Bunshin no Jutsu. My technique. Little bastard. However, Gensei was not completely without his skills. Naruto, who had appeared to his right, was unprepared when Gensei's hands shot out quicker this time and choked when they wrapped around his throat. He's still too much for Naruto to handle, even with a kunai in his back. After everything I taught you, you little shit, but no matter. Gensei couldn't focus his mind enough to finish his sentence. Naruto's vision was getting blurrier by the second, and his lungs hurt. He was dying, he was dying. Instinct kicked in when he kicked and clawed at Gensei, who abruptly dropped him. The effect of the kunai in his back was kicking in. Gensei stretched his arm around his back, and ripped out the kunai, ignoring the blaring pain that came with the action. He was going to kill this little bastard. Gensei stumbled forward with his kunai, aiming to kill. Naruto fumbled trying to perform the Kawarimi no Jutsu, but it was too late. Luckily, his aim was off, and he missed Naruto's heart, piercing his stomach instead. Naruto screamed out in pain. I don't want to die? This time, tears blurred his vision. Please, somebody, save me? He screamed again when the kunai was being turned slowly in his stomach. Gensei smirked cruelly before slowly taking it out, prolonging his torture. To think I was going to make this kid my apprentice. Gensei lifted the kunai, to forever end the miserable life of young Uzumaki Naruto. A horizontal slash. His head was completely separated from his body and it rolled onto the floor, blood pouring out in copious. The body fell to its knees, and finally onto the floor, more blood flowing onto Naruto's bedroom floor. Behind, Azuki Yugo was panting heavily, with her blood-stained wakizashi in her hand. She had done it. Gensei was dead, his head severed from his body. Yugo had forcibly recovered from her paralysis, and just in time. The boy who had saved her life would have died if it weren't for her timely intervention. Naruto weakly looked at the beautiful woman, who dropped to her knees in exhaustion, still affected by Gensei's paralyzing chakra. She crawled forward with a strange look in her eyes, an emotion he wasn't used to seeing. She's worried about me? Was the last thought that went through his head before he passed out due to blood loss. Yugo continued to crawl to Naruto, but she had no idea how she was going to get him to a hospital in her current state. She reached for him and carefully put his head into her lap. While she waited for the reinforcements to come, they always came too damn late. Yugo observed his blood-stained face. It was Uzumaki Naruto, the vessel of the Kyuubi no Yoko. Yugo, like almost every other person in Konoha, had only appalling and untrue things to say about this poor boy. She, like many others, had lost friends and family members as well to the Kyuubi. She was too young at the time to go fight the Kyuubi, and all she could do was watch helplessly as the bodies of her loved ones and comrades were buried. Even the Hokage, leader of the village, lost his life that day. She had decidedly and unjustly hated this boy for that, unwilling to distinguish between the child and the demon fox. However, she had never encountered the boy before that night, so she would never know if her feelings would have made her see him as a monster. But after this night, after he saved her life, she could not hold on to the hatred she had felt. She realized how fickle her hatred was when she actually did meet the boy. While Yugo did not comprehend why this boy stopped the despicable old man in his attempt at torture, why he didn't feed off of loneliness the way another child might have, she couldn't help regretting the feelings she had before. How much unnecessary pain has this child been through, she thought. While he may never know the unkind thoughts and comments she had about him before, Yugo, ever one for moral uprightness, resolved to make it up to him. A lone figure came in from the window. It was a ninja she did not know, but he wore the Hite 8 with the symbol of the leaf emblazoned on it. She sighed in relief. Quick, we have to get him to a hospital quick. Yugo told him. Everything was all right now, and after Naruto was released from the hospital, Yugo would make it up to him. However, the ninja was not in any rush to take Naruto to the hospital. He glanced at the head of Gensei and clicked his tongue in annoyance. Idiot was always too sadistic for his own good. I'll have to clean up his mess. The ninja took out a kunai. I told him to choose another place to rendezvous, but as usual, he fucked up. Yugo stared at him in horror. An accomplice? Reinforcements aren't coming. Sorry, but you had to die. The man said, any last words? This was the worst possible thing that could have happened. She could barely move, her energy having gone after being paralyzed by Jensei. I'm at a serious disadvantage. I'm tired, all I have is this wakizashi, and I can't let any harm to come to Naruto. On top of this, he has to get to the hospital soon, or he'll die. Yugo was at a loss at what to do. At the very least, I can stall. She opened her mouth to reply to him, only to be interrupted. Too late. The man yelled, and he blurred in motion. No. Yugo only saw a glint of silver, before her body slumped to the floor, in relief. Her Anbu partner had woken up. Not today. He grunted, after having shoved a kunai through the man's ear. It was over. Come on, senpai, let's get you and the kid to the hospital. The Anbu said. There was a hole in his mask, but it was still intact. Naruto? Yugo said weakly, I'm okay, save him. I order you? Don't worry, Azuki-senpai, I'll make sure he lives. Her fatigue overcame her, and Yugo finally slumped into blissful sleep. Her comrade picked up both of them, and after flaring out a chakra signature, sped off to the hospital, intent on saving the boy's life. Gekko Hayate rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. He didn't know what to say, it was a direct order, and he obeyed. It's okay, senpai, you don't have to owe me anything. He pleaded. The woman in front of him was bowing. Her long, purple hair came over her head, blocking off her face. It hung just above the floor. Regardless, if it was not for you, Gekko-san, Uzumaki Naruto and I would surely have you. Yugo said, still in her bow. Hayate sighed. Please stop bowing, Azuki-senpai. Yugo straightened up. Truly, it's fine. I couldn't have disobeyed you even if I wanted to. You gave a direct order, remember? Besides, I couldn't let my captain die. Yugo smiled sincerely at him. She reached into her kunai pouch and pulled out a scroll. Hayate looked at it apprehensively. Sealing was a more obscure shinobi art. Anyone who could use sealing effectively would be someone to be wary of. Please take this as a token of my gratitude, Gekko-san. Yugo held the scroll between her thumbs and index fingers, and did 3 quick hand seals. She rolled it open, and a katana popped out, as if by magic. This katana has aided me in many battles, saving my life countless times. Anbu missions are very dangerous. I wish for you to keep it. It may very well save your life. Yugo explained. Hayate gingerly took the katana from her without complaint. I heard you were a budding swordsman. Maybe it will be of greater use to you than me, Gekko-san. Yugo said. Hayate. He replied, getting the feel for the katana. Yugo looked at him, surprised. He smiled, call me Hayate. Yugo smiled in return, then, I must insist you call me Yugo. Yes, Yugo-senpai, Hayate replied. Azuki-san. Yugo turned. It was one of the Anbu commissioned to guard Naruto, he is awake, and Hokage-sama requests your presence. Yugo nodded at Hayate, and left with the Anbu. Naruto's eyes fluttered open suddenly, and he shot straight up out of bed. However, he quickly regretted his sudden action, as his stomach flared up in pain. He couldn't help but cough. Well, at least I know I'm alive. He muttered, rubbing his aching stomach. Naruto looked around. He was in the hospital. He spotted an Anbu at the door, regarding him silently. He moved to get out of bed, but the Anbu, who crossed 3 meters in the blink of an eye, pushed him back in. Naruto glared at him, but the Anbu was unfazed. I was ordered to not let you out of bed. Naruto got back into bed. Where is the Sandaime? He asked. The Anbu did not say anything, returning to his original position. Naruto sighed. There was no helping it. But he had more important things to think about. That woman must have saved my life. Naruto's fingers moved to his chin, as he closed his eyes in frustration. But before he could ponder about this, the Sandaime Hokage followed by the very woman that saved his life came into the room. Ah, Naruto-kun, you're awake, said the Sandaime, looking him up and down. Yep, was Naruto's short reply. He noticed that the purple-haired woman was looking at him intently. Damn, she definitely wants something from me. I'm sure you'll be happy to know that you will make a full recovery. Still looking, you were very close to dying. Stop staring at me. About the man known as Jensei. She's not stopping. Village in Earth Country that was nearly destroyed by Konoha. Naruto bit his lip, have returned his body to his village, as a safety precaution. His mouth quivered. Allowed out of the hospital tonight. He couldn't hold it in anymore. Are clothes for you to wear? Stop looking at me. The Hokage and Yugo reared back in surprise. Yugo's cheeks reddened, she was embarrassed. The Hokage glanced at her. Naruto, this is Azuki Yugo. She saved your life last night. Said the Sandame, Yugo-kun asked to see you with me. Naruto looked at her, and took a deep breath. Thank you for saving my life. Naruto said quietly. It was nothing. Yugo replied quickly. The Hokage glanced at her in surprise. Azuki Yugo was usually very stoic, if not a little righteous, ever since she had joined the Anbu. Now however, it was as if she was an aspiring genin again. She had always been a bashful, but stubborn kunoichi, a personality trait she shared with Naruto. Well, I, at least think my life is more than nothing, so thank you anyway. Naruto said coolly. Yugo slightly flinched. This wasn't going like she had envisioned. She had thought that the boy would be striving for anyone's attention. Sorry, I didn't mean it like, Yugo started saying, but Naruto suddenly cut in with boisterous laughter. Huh, I got you, lady. Naruto said, pointing and laughing. Inwardly, he was thinking something else. That was close. If she thinks I'm hostile, she'll approach more warily. As long as she believes that I'm as dumb as they come, I'll have space to maneuver. Naruto grinned. Naruto. That was a mean thing to do. The Sandame chided, apologize. Naruto, anticipating this from the blissfully ignorant Hokage, played along perfectly. But why should I? He shouted indignantly. The Sandame smiled at him, and was about to say something, but Yugo spoke quickly. It is okay, Hokage-sama. I do not mind, she said. Inwardly, she was thinking something else. The Hokage looked on impassively. His actions seemed rehearsed. It would be in my best interest to play along. Uzumaki-san, Yugo said slowly, as if Naruto was an average, dumb little 7-year-old, I would like to thank you. You saved my life as well, when you had no reason to. Naruto smirked mischievously. She suspects something. Don't worry, Yugo-san. It was nothing, he said, grinning madly. The humor was apparent in his voice. In the background, the Sandame sighed. However, Yugo seemed to not care, because she smiled tentatively. Regardless, I believe my life to be more than nothing, she said in good humor, mimicking Naruto's previous words, so I would like to repay you. Naruto's mind was racing, as he reached for his clothes. Repay? Me? I owe her my life. Why would she want to repay me? Yugo was waiting for a reply. Well, Uzumaki-san, I can at least take you out to eat. Where would you like to go? She asked Naruto. He put his finger to his chin, deep in thought. That's it. My best course of action is to bring her in close, and let her distance herself from me. Naruto grinned. Ichiraku. Naruto yelled out deafeningly, playing his part almost perfectly. The Hokage sighed. It's about the only thing he eats. He muttered. Yugo heard him. If he only eats ramen at Ichiraku, then why did he have to think about it? Was her thought. He's definitely smarter than a regular 7-year-old. What is he planning? Well, let us go to Ichiraku's. Will you come, Hokage-sama? Yugo asked, knowing he could not. No, sorry. I have other matters to attend to. The Hokage said, stay in good health, Naruto. Also, report to my office tomorrow. I think I have something you'd like. The Hokage nodded at him, and gave Yugo a discreet, but meaningful glance before leaving. Okay, let's go, Yugo Nichan. Naruto said, smirking inwardly. He could eat ramen with the best of them. She had no idea what she was getting into. Yugo, on the other hand, was trying hard not to feel pleased. She felt like she could be a big sister figure for him, but at the moment, she knew that he was faking. If anything, she wanted to earn the title of big sister properly. So she schooled her face into the usual cold impassiveness like all Anbu had been trained to exude. Okay, was her short, crisp reply. She did not let any emotion into her voice. To his credit, Naruto kept the grin on his face. Inwardly, however, he frowned. She seems to be catching on. But, she revealed her hand too early. I don't know exactly what she wants from me, but I know it involves me in some way. I acted too well. That's why she suspects me. My actions weren't natural, they were rehearsed. She must have caught that. But I didn't slip up, not like she did. The blonde carefully avoided looking at Yugo and just shrugged his shoulders before running, once again leaving her behind. Yugo followed him. The glance that the Hokage had given her told her a lot. The main message was, be careful. Of what though? She was just going to treat a little kid to some ramen, right? Tucci sighed as he was making his next batch of noodles. He wasn't sure how much longer he could continue to make noodles. The revenue from the stand was dwindling, and he might soon be forced to retire it, despite hating the fact that he'd have to do so. More than just a means to money, it represented family. Memories of his deceased wife, Kokura, and Ayame's childhood were what the stand represented for him. Kokura had loved the stand, and Ayame, who had only been 6 years old when Kokura passed on to the next world, loved spending her time not playing with dolls, but working with her mother in the stand, while Tucci watched over them proudly. Those times were truly the happiest in his life. Kokura had been the pillar of their small but happy family. However, around 7.5 years ago, it all went downhill. Ayame had fallen ill, playing in the rain with her friends. Kokura had temporarily taken time off from Ichiraku to take care of her, and Tucci had taken over the stand at the time. His income was a bit slow, having to cover for 2 people, but when Kokura returned it would be remedied. But alas, it was not to be. Kokura, who had unfortunately inherited a weak immune system from her own father, had contracted an illness while nursing Ayame back to health. Tucci would have closed the stand right there and then to take care of his wife, but luckily for him, one of Kokura's friends had taken time off of her kunoichi duties to take care of her. However, Tucci couldn't handle the massive amount of customers alone, so the numbers started dwindling. Months later, Ichiraku had lost many of its customers. The only daily customers were the members from the Akamichi clan, and of course, the legendary Yondaime Hokage. Kokura could have died any day at this point. The medicine to cure her was rare and expensive to find, and nobody had any luck in finding anyone to make it. Her friend, Kushina, practically lived with them to care for Kokura. Ayame had fallen into an unhealthy depression due to her guilt for being the one that Kokura had contracted the illness from. Things could not get any worse at that point. Then the news of the Kyuubi no Yoko came. Among the chaos that was occurring in Konoha at that point, Tucci had received information that someone to make the cure for Kokura's illness was located, but was at this point much too far for anybody to meet, especially as the Kyuubi was only a few days away. Kushina had immediately volunteered to go retrieve the medicine. Her offer was rejected by the Konoha Council, and Tucci had understood immediately. The village was more important than his wife. However, Kushina was persistent. The council had rejected her offer, so she decided to plead with the Yondaime Hokage to let her go. He would have definitely relented, but with the Kyuubi fast approaching, his duties as a Hokage and came before any others, and he had forbidden her from going. "No," were his exact words, "I will go instead." The dramatics of his statement were taken away when he left and came back with the medicine in about 10 minutes, courtesy of Hiraishin. The council had still given him hell for doing it. Tucci couldn't thank him enough for it. Before they knew it, the day of the Kyuubi's attack came. It was Ayame's birthday, the 10th of October. Kokura was making a miraculous recovery, and was feeling well enough to be walking around. Ayame's depression had vanished, only to be replaced with fear. The Kyuubi's killing intent was massive enough to be felt all over the village, even though it was many miles away. Ayame had even soiled her clothes that morning, though it was not embarrassing or humorous at all. Tucci had only barely restrained himself from losing his own bladder. Kushina went into premature labor. As Tucci worked on mixing the noodles, he smiled wryly at the shocking memory. He hadn't even known Kushina was pregnant. But the weight of the Kyuubi's killing intent had cancelled her genjutsu and forced it through, and a bright blonde-haired blue-eyed baby was the result. It went without saying. It was Ayame's worst birthday ever. Baby Naruto might have been a bright spot on an otherwise horrible day, but the burden placed on him. Tucci shook his head. There was no way he could have ever held a grudge against that boy. He had too much loyalty to Kushina for that. Tucci and Kokura had sat down with Ayame, and made sure that she would not share the same fear of Naruto that the rest of the village had. Ayame, who was only 5 at the time, had listened adamantly, and agreed with whatever her mother was saying. She did not truly understand well at the time, but she understood that Naruto housed the Kyuubi and that he was a baby, not a demon. The threat of the Kyuubi was gone, and the reinstated Sandaime had made a law where none were allowed to speak of the Kyuubi with penalty of death. It was all to protect Naruto from those who thought him to be the demon himself. Teuchi was there when Kushina gave birth to him. Though Naruto had no idea, he had to admit that Naruto certainly didn't look like a demon. Demon or not, the law was in place, and the Yondaime, for whom the village was in mourning, was dead and buried. Kokura had fallen slightly ill again, because the medicine had not been strong enough. The doctors had said that the person who made the medicine did not take into account that Kokura had a weak immune system, thus resulting in her contracting the illness once more. Without someone to make the medicine again, both Kokura and he knew that she would not survive. They decided not to tell Ayame or Kushina, if only to spare them the pain of knowing. It was then that Ichiraku was closed temporarily, as Teuchi helped in the movement to rebuild the village. Kushina had moved to a new apartment and lived alone with Naruto. She was also in depression, having lost her husband. Naruto was the only reason she was still alive, but without the support of anybody else, the bubbly young baby was too much for her to handle. Then, when Naruto had been about 8 months old, Teuchi shut his eyes tightly as the tears sprung. Kushina had died that day. He could not believe that she would be killed so easily, even against the numerous enemies that had attacked her. But the truth was that she hadn't even fought back, having lost her will to live. Her loving, secret husband was dead, and most of her friends stopped associating with her, and her son was one of the most hated people in the entire village. Kushina had died willingly, abandoning her one and only son. Luckily, baby Naruto was in his care on that day, else he would have died alongside his mother. Uzumaki Kushina had taken the coward's way out. Kokura died about a month after Ayame's 6th birthday. Ayame, to this day, thought that Kokura had died because of her depression of losing her best friend. While Ayame did not exactly know how Kushina had died, she was half right. The illness had also acted up, and Kokura was dying. Her last wish, her dying wish, was that he keep Ichiraku alive. It was a place of such happiness for her. The memories of good times there were the most priceless. The times when it was just him, Kokura, and Ayame, and sometimes Kushina would come with her husband, which was a deep secret that only a few knew. This was before the stand became popular, when the customers were few and the money was scarce, but that was when they were happiest. Once Kokura had died, Naruto, who had been in their care, was sent to an orphanage on Teuchi's request. This was one of his greatest regrets, one that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But he couldn't care for Naruto, especially when Ayame was so young, and so many people were willing to hurt the poor babe. He made just enough money to provide for himself and Ayame. Taking care of young Naruto would ensure that he would not survive. He couldn't ask anyone else for any money, not when the charisma of the village was in shambles. Many shinobi had died in the attack. Civilians were being asked to do some jobs that shinobi would normally do. Teuchi knew, no matter how much he denied it, that by sending Naruto to an orphanage he had destroyed the boy's chances of having a happy childhood. Ayame had even questioned why he couldn't keep Naruto, but he had lied to her, not wanting to admit it. He had not wanted to admit that he was a coward, that he was running away. And with the way things were looking now, Ichiraku may not have long to go. What am I going to tell Ayame, or Naruto for that matter? What would you think of me, Kokura? Teuchi sighed wearily. He couldn't stall much longer. Sooner or later, he'd have to tell them. Yugo stared, and stared, and stared some more. Her fingers trembled. One of her eyes twitched. She was biting her lips. This, brat, was what she was thinking. How such a small child could pack away so much ramen was beyond her. He had just eaten the equivalent of AC-ranked mission pay. In one sitting, the chef, whose name she learned was Teuchi, grinned at her. Yugo understood. She wasn't the first person the Gaki had done this to. Ah, I'm stuffed. Thanks a lot, Yugo Nichan. Naruto couldn't keep the mocking grin from his face. The stack of ramen bowls was teetering. Yugo reckoned it was about as tall as her if she stood beside it. Thanks a lot, Mai. You're welcome, was her cold reply. She didn't have to force herself to keep a frosty tone. She wanted to strangle the kid. This was his plan. He was going to eat away all of her money. Well, it isn't going to work. I'm going to be part of your life whether you like it or not, Naruto-kun. Yugo was adamantly thinking. Naruto was thinking something else, something more devious. Just one more push, and she'll think twice before trying to mess with my life. Naruto put his hands behind his head. We should do this again, Yugo Ni-chan, he exclaimed, grinning widely. Yugo regarded him with a small smile on her face. He looks cute. In a fake, devious, sort of way of course. Yes, we should. It was fun. Naruto's grin slipped very slightly, but Yugo caught it. Yugo smirked inwardly, got you. Actually, I think I want another bowl. Tuchi-oken, beef ramen, Naruto said, even though he could barely eat anymore. Coming right up, Tuchi grinned. If Naruto keeps bringing people like this, he thought jokingly, maybe I'll be able to keep the stand. Yugo held back her glare. The kid was going to eat until he puked. Silently, Yugo took a scroll out of her kunai pouch. Naruto watched her curiously. She bit her thumb, drawing blood, and rolled open the scroll. Naruto saw a 4-column array. With her blood, she made a circle and drew a pull seal inside of it while focusing a little chakra for a sacrifice. Immediately feeling the slight pull in her brain, Yugo concentrated her chakra to the right amount and made a tiger hand seal. In a small poof, money popped out. Naruto was flabbergasted. Fuuinjutsu. Yugo placed the money on the counter. This should be enough for the meal, Yugo said indifferently. She noted the shocked look on Naruto's face. Looks like he's interested in Fuuinjutsu. Shaking his head, Naruto said his graces once more before digging in feverishly, as if he hadn't eaten a stack of ramen earlier, itadakimasu. As he was eating, Naruto felt a pair of arms encircle him, and felt another cheek rub into his own whiskered one. Good evening, Naruto-chan. Naruto quickly swallowed the noodles hanging from his mouth before protesting, get off, Ayame ni-chan. When he looked back on the day, he thought that it had been a bad idea on his part to swallow the noodles so quickly. Ayame backed off, pouting. TCH, so mean. Smiling at Yugo, she entered the stand, greeting her father and dropping off her school bag, before pulling up a chair and sitting across from Naruto. Ayame sighed as she propped her elbows on the counter and placed her head in her hands, leaning forward on the counter. She looked at Naruto. You're so lucky, Naruto-chan. I bet Ninja Academy will be so much more fun than regular school. Today was so boring. Naruto did not reply. He was sure that more than words would come out of his mouth if he did. Anyway, where were you these past 3 days? Why do you look so green? Ayame said, backing away looking at Naruto's face. GRK. Naruto, in response, jumped from his stool and ran to the nearest alley. Yugo followed after him, if only to mock him. After emptying the contents of his stomach into a dumpster, Naruto bent over breathing. Yuck, I hate the taste of vomit. Yugo, who was unfazed at the sight of vomit, grinned viciously. Maybe you would like another bowl to take away the bad taste? Naruto bent over the dumpster again. Yugo kept grinning. That'll teach him. Naruto walked back looking much better, but he was disgruntled. Yugo had an amused look on her face, no doubt finding humor in Naruto's misery. What's wrong, Ayame ni-chan? Naruto questioned, having caught sight of her tearing eyes. Naruto, Tucson, the stand? Ayame choked out, tears falling fresh from her eyes. He wants to close. No way. Naruto slowly turned to Tuchi. This couldn't be happening. How could he? This is the one true place he could call home. Why? Do you need money? Is it all the free meals you gave me? You don't have to give me any more free meals. I'll give you money. Why? Naruto was getting hysterical. Tears were threatening to spill. Yugo looked at him, surprised. The boy was very resilient from what she had seen so far. Why was he breaking down so quickly after hearing this news? He must really love his ramen, was her thought. But as Yugo saw the seriousness of the situation, she didn't think it was so funny. Naruto, I'm sorry. Really, but I can't afford to keep it, was all Tuchi could say. Naruto immediately felt worse. Tuchi-oken, he can't afford to keep it? If he does, then what will happen if he goes bankrupt? What will become of Ayame ni-chan? Naruto thought sadly, am I being selfish? Why should he keep the stand for my sake, when he and his daughter would suffer? Naruto couldn't stop the tears from rolling down his cheeks. Yugo silently watched. Tucson, Kazan's memory, her wish, Ayame wailed. Tuchi wrapped her up in a comforting hug. Naruto couldn't help but turn away, sadly. Ayame ni-chan. Naruto didn't mind the tears that were falling to the ground. As much as he thought of Tuchi and Ayame as his family, he knew that the bond between blood families was much greater still. But a comforting hug wouldn't hurt. Right now, his only salvation was his tears. Each drop carried within it a little bit of his sadness. It would take many more tears before he felt better. Yugo watched Naruto, noticing the tears. Is he crying for them, or for himself? Or maybe both? Yugo thought that he could use a hug, but her body refused to move. Would he appreciate her hugging him, or would he resent it? The boy didn't seem to like outsiders, and she was exactly that. But he really looked like he could use a hug. She didn't move to comfort the boy. She just stood, silently watching, not letting any emotions out like the Anbu she was. The Sandaime Hokage watched the events unfold from far away, perched on the rooftops, observing silently and undetected. It seems, Yugo-kun, being a big sister for Naruto will not be so easy. The Sandaime knew that Anbu was supposed to kill the heart of the shinobi in order to make them perfect, and that Yugo had refused to let her heart be killed. But it seemed that the Anbu had more influence on her than she thought. Being a part of Naruto's life is not easy. Naruto only truly lets people into his life if he trusts them. While it may make life tougher for him, he hasn't exactly had anyone to teach him, considering the indifference he has felt from almost everyone around him. The Sandaime sighed. He had made the law in hopes that Naruto's life could be a bit happier, among other things. But he could not force the village populace to accept and acknowledge him. The aging Hokage sadly watched as Naruto suddenly ran away from the stand, his sorrow sprinkling the ground in the form of tears. Naruto thought that he had no idea, but the Sandaime knew of Naruto's cleverly hidden genius. But the Sandaime understood where Naruto didn't, that genius did nothing against human emotions. As hard as ninja tried, emotions could not be destroyed, only contained. Naruto, while a genius in his own right, was also a 7-year-old boy. He'll come to terms with it, and will be all that much stronger for it. The Sandaime confidently thought. Turning his gaze upon Yugo once more, he noticed that she watched Naruto run away with a confused look on her face. The Hokage could understand her confusion through experience of dealing with this many times before. As much as she wanted to comfort the boy, she found that she could not move. The Anbu didn't exactly promote closeness. Yugo was unique in that attribute. This will not end so badly, I think, thought the Sandaime. This might be exactly what they needed to feel, to heal. Yugo had been following Naruto the whole night. This time, however, she did not follow. It was currently the month of January, and the chilly season of winter had invaded Konoha, leaving none safe from its frosty touch, whether young or old, civilian or shinobi. However, despite the cold, Konoha did not often see snow. This year was different than most, as there was a nice snowfall this year. Through the months of snowfall, kids were engaged in uncommon winter activities, for Konoha at least. It was quite a sight to see children rolling around in the snow, or building snowmen. Some couples were even enjoying walks out in the cool weather, hugging each other closely. There was definitely an air of romance. This was also a great opportunity for the deadlier population of Konoha, the shinobi. Instead of using kunai or shuriken to practice, snowballs were used to prevent fatal injury. Veteran shinobi were using snow walking as a means to refine their chakra control. It was very different than most of the regular chakra control techniques used in Konoha. The idea was to mold chakra at the bottom of their feet and harden the snow beneath the foot until no imprints were left. The more perfectionist and elite shinobi even went as far as to return the snow to its original softness after removing their foot for the sake of true stealth. However, though winter did bring a certain joy with it, today was not a particularly joyful day. The winter wind, though usually nice and cool against the face, was harsh and stinging with a particular ravage. Much of the population had stayed indoors today, and many shops were so consequentially closed. Of course, not many shop owners were as stubborn as Ichiraku Tuchi, the owner of Ichiraku, a humble, but relatively famous ramen stand. Tuchi sighed as he sat at the counter, awaiting customers looking for the delicious flavor and warmth of ramen. There was no one but him in the stand at the moment. The day had brought precious few customers. In fact, only the ninjas who were brave enough to weather the weather had come. Ayame, who was 8 years old at the moment, was in her room. She had fervently told her father to stay away. Tuchi couldn't help but grin. As sneaky as Ayame tried to be, she was only 8 years old. It was quite obvious that she was hiding something from him. May I ask what is so funny? Tuchi jerked in surprise. He looked into the waiting eyes and wry smile of the Sandaime Hokage. Hokage-sama. Ah, welcome, welcome. Sorry to keep you waiting, what can I get you? Tucci said, feeling a little embarrassed that he had been caught so unfocused. A miso ramen, if you will, Tucci-san. The Hokage said, smiling pleasantly. Coming right up. Tucci went on making the ramen with a practiced speed, and the Hokage has his warm miso ramen within minutes. Ah, thank you, said the old man, placing money on the counter after grabbing the bowl of steaming noodles. It is much too cold today, wouldn't you agree? Tucci nodded, seated once more. Yes, the unexpected snowfall brought me a lot of business, but nobody wants to leave their homes today. Tucci responded, you're the first in a while, Hokage-sama. The Hokage swallowed the food in his mouth before responding, well, despite the slow day, I'm sure you must have had a funny thought or you would not have been grinning so. Tucci grinned again. Oh, I was just thinking about Ayame. He replied, where is little Ayame? I was wondering why I didn't hear her delightful voice upon entering the shop. The Hokage asked, drinking the last of his ramen. She's locked herself in her room. Tucci replied, smiling, not before telling me that I was not allowed in under any circumstances. The Hokage gave him an inquiring look. For the past week, she's been hiding away in her room most of the time. She always asks to eat in her room, and is eating more food than she usually would. And she goes to take a shower, while coming out looking like she hasn't showered at all. I'm sure it is quite obvious what she's trying to hide from me. Tucci said. The Hokage chuckled. I must say, she's a lovely girl. I'm afraid that not many girls her age would be able to bear the responsibility of taking in a stray and making it her pet. He replied, do you know what it is yet? Tucci shook his head. I'm not sure, but I believe it to be a cat. If not, then a very quiet dog. Ayame has enough sense not to take in something dangerous. Tucci said. Most parents would make their children get rid of such pets. The Hokage said, that's a testament to your great parenting skills. Well, she'll have to let it go eventually. Tucci said gruffly, not used to being praised so easily by the Hokage. I think I'll let her keep it until the snow dries up. I hope the creature isn't sick or infected, said the Hokage, worriedly. He looked at the bowl of ramen he had just consumed. Tucci let out a sharp laugh. Don't worry, Hokage-sama, I haven't let Ayame near the food. Tucci said, anyway, I don't think I'll confront her about it, unless it becomes trouble. I'm glad, Tucci-san. The smiles of the children must be cherished. It is their happiness that keeps these old bones going. The Hokage said. Ah, well, I must be off. The work of a Hokage never ends, I'm afraid. The Sandaime said, sadly. Tucci nodded. Well, thank you for coming, Hokage-sama. Tucci said. Please pass on my greetings to Ayame-chan. Take care. After the Hokage left, Tucci decided it was a good time as any to close up for the day. It didn't seem like anyone else was going to come. Perhaps tomorrow would be a more fruitful day. Tucson, I'm gonna eat in my room. Tucci suppressed his grin. Just because he was letting her keep her stray didn't mean he could give her a hard time for it. You know, Ayame-chan, you've been eating a lot lately. Tucci said, in an offhand approach. Oh, Ayame seemed flustered for a moment before recovering. I've just been feeling hungry, Saul. Oh, don't eat too much, or you'll get fat. He poked her stomach, inciting a giggle. I'll be fine. Ayame suddenly looked at him accusingly. Don't come. Tucci held up his hands in surrender. I won't. He watched as Ayame put food for two into a tray, along with some milk. Yes, most definitely a cat. Tucci thought, grinning as she left. A loud clang jerked him awake. Tucci rubbed the blurriness from his eyes. The noise had come from the stand. Was it a burglar? Tucci hurriedly, yet cautiously headed to the stand. As he came closer, he heard a familiar voice. Oh, I hope Tucson didn't wake up. Tucci sighed softly in relief. It was just Ayame. But what is she doing up at this hour? Tucci thought, perhaps feeding her pet? Tucci's thought turned out to be correct. Betcha, never had ramen before. She chirped. Tucci backed away a little, so it would appear that he was farther away. Ayame? Tucci called, walking slowly to give Ayame the chance to hide her pet. What are you doing up this late? Oh no. Quick, hide here. Stay there. Tucci could hear Ayame's whispered voice. He waited a few seconds before stepping out. She was standing in front of the sink, with her back to the cabinet doors. So that's where she's hiding it. Tucci thought. Tucson. Oh, I was feeling a little hungry, so I thought I'd have some ramen. He. Ayame said, grabbing a half-eaten ramen bowl. She made to eat from it, but Tucci stopped her. It's okay Ayame, you don't need to convince me anymore. I already know, Tucci said. He hated to do it, but if her pet really was sick then he couldn't have it in the stand and eating from the same bowls that he served to customers. Ayame looked shocked at the fact that he knew. She had tried her hardest to hide it. I'm sorry, she wailed, but he was outside alone, and he ran away from home, and I couldn't just let him stay outside in the cold, and. It's okay Ayame. Tucci interrupted smilingly, I'm not making you get rid of him. You're not? And break my little girl's heart? I should think not, Tucci thought to himself. No. It was a good thing that you've done Ayame-chan, to take care of something. It is one of the greatest joys someone can have, he said. Now, I'm guessing the poor fellow was hungry? Tucci said, bending in front of the sink cabinet doors. Yeah, he woke me up. He can eat so muwwch. Ayame said, yawning. Well then, Tucci said, opening the cabinet doors, let's feed Hai. Tucci almost had a stroke right there and then. It felt surreal. He had thought it was a cat, but he was wrong. It wasn't a cat, it wasn't even a dog. No, what he was looking at was the tiny face and curious blue eyes of none other than Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto? Tucci whispered, so softly that only he could hear it. Come on Naruto-chan, Ayame called, isn't it great? You don't have to stay cramped up in my room all the time now. But, Naruto whispered softly. Tucci realized that this was the first time he actually heard Naruto speak. I like it in Ayame-ni-chan's room. His voice was so soft. This was Uzumaki Naruto, the son of Uzumaki Kushina? Tucci couldn't believe that any offspring of Kushina could be so soft-spoken. Oh Naruto, you don't have to be quiet anymore. Ayame said, you're allowed to stay with us. Tucson said it's okay. Okay, then, can I stay in your room, Ayame-ni-chan? Naruto suddenly yelled happily, as if he hadn't screamed in ages. Never mind, he is definitely Kushina's son. Tucci thought flatly. Now, Naruto, Tucci started, gaining Naruto's attention, aren't you supposed to be at the orphanage? Naruto pouted. I ran away. They don't like me, and I don't like them either, he exclaimed. Why? Well, you can stay with us for the time being, but you'll have to go back eventually, or Ayame and I might get into trouble. Tucci explained. Ah, do I have to? At Tucci's nod, Naruto pouted again. But wait, how do you know I lived at the orphanage? Oh, hey Naruto-chan, don't you want to finish your ramen? Ayame interrupted. I want to go back to sleep, and I need my new teddy bear. Ramen. Naruto suddenly jumped at Ayame, reaching for his beloved noodles. She giggled as they tumbled onto the floor. Naruto proceeded to attack the salty food with fervor. Tucci sighed with relief. Then he looked at the pair with a smile. Ayame, my darling little girl. You don't fully realize what you've done, but you have gained a loyal little brother who will love you forever. He couldn't help but think fondly. He watched as Naruto finished his ramen, and as Ayame dragged her new teddy bear back to bed. And a ramen lover. I can't wait until he gets some money. I just know I'm going to make a fortune off him alone. Tucci rubbed his hands in anticipation. Itadakimasu, rang Naruto's voice, as he attacked his ramen voraciously. As he ate, he felt a pair of arms encircle him from the back and heard a familiar voice whisper in his ears. Where are you these days, Naruto-chan? Ayame said. I want my teddy bear back. Naruto smiled at the memories. Let me eat, Ayame-ni-chan, he yelled in mock anger. So mean. Everything will be alright, Tucci thought, as he watched his two children play frolicking with each other. Tucci regarded the impassive woman in front of him. Yugo, quite obviously a member of Konoha's Anbu forces if the mask hanging from her belt was any indication, was a decidedly odd woman. Her long, flowing, silky, violet hair would have been the first sign to her oddity, but Tucci had seen enough weird hair colors and styles that it was quite easy to see a violet hair color as normal. It was her fixation with Naruto that made her odd. She had not known Naruto for a long time, having only met him after the blonde had been caught up in one of her missions. Tucci did not know the details behind the situation that had led to their meeting, but from what he had picked up from the woman, Naruto had saved her life. It was probably the reason why she seemed so obsessed with the blonde. Perhaps she merely felt indebted to the blonde for having saved her life, or perhaps it was because of her own desires. Maybe it was a mixture of both. Whatever it was that drove Azuki Yugo's ambition to be a part of Naruto's life, it was also what made her stand in front of him. "You want to what? I'm going to be off duty for quite a while," Yugo told him, "and it seems that you are losing customers." "What? The reason why you cannot afford the stand," Yugo continued, "has nothing to do with the food, and more to do with the volume of customers you receive. Because only yourself and your daughter work here, you cannot possibly manage the customers that come to your stand all by yourselves, and that's why you've been losing customers. My solution will work," Yugo told him. Tucci regarded her for a moment before replying. "I can't afford to pay you for advertising," he said. "I don't have the funds for another employee. I don't need money." Yugo replied, "If it means that your stand will stay open, I'll help out for free." Tucci already suspected her real reasons for offering to work for free. "If you feel so strongly, then I'll gladly accept your help." Tucci told her, "I can swallow my pride if it means that I'll be able to support my family." "But what are your real reasons for doing this?" Tucci asked, surprising Yugo with this question. She didn't reply immediately, obviously rushing to think of an answer. I can't just stand by and let this stand go out of business," Yugo told him. Tucci shook his head. "Is it for Naruto?" he continued, ignoring Yugo's obvious lie. Yugo didn't reply, causing Tucci to sigh. "Listen, I don't know your reasons for wanting to help Naruto, but if you're really sincere about helping him, you had better prepare yourself to be an active part of his life." Tucci told her, "Naruto doesn't trust easy, he was raised that way." Yugo hesitated, "I don't know how to." "Naruto's exceptionally curious," Tucci told her. "He'll question everything, and it's probably why he's so intelligent at such a young age. It won't be easy, but if you keep trying, if you let him know your true intentions through your actions, you can do it." Yugo didn't say anything, "But you'll never get anywhere if you don't open up to him. You can't expect it to be a one-sided thing, not with Naruto. He's not like other children, he's not going to trust you if you don't give him any reason to," Tucci said. Yugo regarded him for a moment before replying. "Why are you telling me this?" Tucci fell silent for a minute, thinking of his own reasons. Naruto, despite how much he got along with Ayame, needed more people he could trust in, confide in. Tucci knew how much Ayame meant to the blonde, but Ayame was far from being a shinobi, and Naruto was definitely going to be one. He needed someone else, someone with whom he could relate. "I'm doing it for him," Tucci told her, putting it simply but not elaborating. When Yugo didn't reply, Tucci just sighed. "Look, I'm trying to help you here. The only advice I can give you is to not try to hide your objective from him." Tucci told her, "He'll only trust you less. It's up to you to follow it." The two of them just stared at each, gazes locked as they each pondered the course of action that the woman would take. Yugo was the first to break eye contact, gazing at the floor in deep thought. The Sandaime Hokage looked at the sheets in front of him. That man had infiltrated Konoha and lived here for so long. Were the defenses of the village so despicable? Gensei had been a genin from one of the older generations, one of those failures that hadn't made it to Chunin. The Sandaime didn't know him at all, but then again there were many shinobi that the Hokage didn't know personally. Apparently, the real Gensei had looked very similar to the man that had been impersonating him for so long. The impersonator had snuck in as a civilian needing a job. It was as is that he watched his look-alike from afar, learning personality traits and the like. And the civilian disappeared around the same time as the real Gensei had been sent on a mission. It was a seemingly easy C-class mission with his two teammates. It was assumed that the impersonator had decided to use this chance to strike. After the mission was accomplished, on the way back, he had killed all three members of the team, got rid of the body of the real Gensei, and brought the bodies of his two dead teammates all the way back to Konoha. And the story from there was of basic infiltration. But there was evidence of an accomplice. And there could be more. Something must be done, thought the Sandaime, grimly. Yugo headed straight towards Naruto's apartment, already cleaned and rebuilt after the whole fiasco had gone down. It had been only a few hours since she had spoken with Tucci, and the Anbuku no Ichi had done some deep thinking about exactly what she wanted with the blonde Jinchuriki. It wasn't the first time that someone had saved her life, and she hadn't been so adamant about involving herself in their lives. Granted, Naruto wasn't exactly a ninja, but in the end it amounted to the same. That meant that she wanted something more than just repaying the life debt that she felt she owed the blonde. Yugo took a deep breath before knocking on the front door. When she heard the shuffling of feet, likely Naruto's, the violet-haired woman could feel her heartbeat quicken. Nervousness attacked her, but Yugo's mind was set. She wasn't about to falter now. The door creaked open, and Naruto stood inside, regarding her with no small amount of surprise. "Yugo-san," Naruto said softly, pausing for a moment. The two of them watched each other, the blonde uncertain of what the woman wanted and she uncertain of what he was thinking. "What are you doing here?" Naruto asked. Yugo took a deep breath again. "I wished to speak with you, Uzumaki-san." Yugo told him, her voice unwavering. "May I come in?" Naruto looked at her with suspicion, but backed away nonetheless, granting her entrance into his small apartment. Yugo stepped beyond the threshold, going inside past the blonde. Naruto shut the door behind her as she slipped off her sandals. "Come on," Naruto muttered, walking past her into the main room. "Let's grab a seat or something." Following him, Yugo sat down beside him on his sofa. Naruto's apartment was quite small, a single room with an attached kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom. The blonde had all the necessary furniture, rugs, dining table, sofa, and a television, but not much else. She noticed a shelf in the corner of the room, full of books and scrolls, and a few plants here and there. But apart from that it was barren, an apartment that could house one or two persons. "Well, was there something you wanted to talk about?" Naruto asked, his voice sounding duller than Yugo had ever heard it. He was probably still upset over Ichiraku's impending bankruptcy. "That other night, when we were at Ichiraku," Yugo started, noticing the blonde twitch, "I noticed you looking surprised when I had unsealed money from my scroll." Naruto eyed her weirdly. He obviously had not expected this. Yeah, it was Fuuinjutsu." The blonde said. "What about it? Are you interested in Fuuinjutsu?" Yugo asked. Naruto paused at her words. I've experimented with a few seals here and there, it's a pretty interesting art." Naruto replied, unsure of what the woman wanted. Would you like to learn?" Yugo asked, dropping the bomb without any subtlety as all. Naruto eyed her with a surprised look on his face. "Learn Fuin? You want to teach me?" Naruto asked her, flabbergasted. "Why?" Yugo bit her lip, hesitating for only a moment, but remembering Tuchi's advice, she powered on. "There are a lot of reasons, and I don't think I know them all myself." Yugo told him truthfully, "You saved my life that night, and I do feel indebted, but it's more than that. I grew up as an only child, and my parents decided to not have another child." Yugo told him truthfully, I've always wanted to have a sibling, someone to whom I could be a big sister." Naruto watched her with bewilderment, understanding what but uncomprehending why of what she was trying to tell him. "I thought that perhaps, because the opportunity presented itself, maybe there can be more to, well, us." Yugo finished awkwardly. As Yugo waited silently for him to speak, Naruto opened and closed his mouth a few times before replying. "So, you're saying that, you want to be my big sister?" Naruto asked, speaking clumsily. Yugo didn't reply, only ducking her head slightly at Naruto's incredulous gaze. Naruto just gaped at her, disbelieving what she had told him. The two sat in silence as Naruto tried to get his mind around her request. Yugo trembled nervously for a moment. She may have been Anbu, a cold and collected kunoichi of Konoha, but she had just told the blonde something personal, something that could have been considered a weakness. I understand if," Yugo started, but Naruto cut her off. If you're really sure," Naruto said, "I guess, there's no harm in trying." It was Yugo's turn to look at him with disbelief, having expected him to refuse to have anything to do with her. If anything, Yugo looked hopeful. "Then," Yugo said, trailing off. Naruto just shrugged, and an awkward silence befell upon the two. They sat quite uncomfortably on Naruto's couch, and it wasn't until Yugo remembered her original offer that someone spoke. "Well, how about we talk about Fuuinjutsu?" the woman suggested to the blonde, giving him a hesitant smile. Naruto couldn't help but be excited. Sure, he didn't trust her, not so immediately, but he felt her sincerity. It wasn't like the feigned consideration that Jensei had exuded. He could feel that she was putting forth her feelings, putting some of her trust in him. Other than Ayame, Naruto didn't really have anyone he could trust in. Maybe, he thought, I can give it another shot. Naruto had already explained to Yugo whatever he knew about the what's of Fuuinjutsu, and demonstrated the basic sealing and unsealing method that was popular amongst shinobi that bothered to use Fuuinjutsu, the sealing of physical objects. In Naruto's case, he used a kunai. While he had been extremely saddened that Ichiraku was facing bankruptcy, he hadn't exactly sat around and just cried all day. Granted, he was moping around, but that didn't stop him from reading up on the Fuuinjutsu scrolls that Gensei had left him before his unfortunate, or fortunate, demise. That was an excellent demonstration of the basis of sealing techniques. Yugo started, her voice sounding brighter than usual. Now, I want you to forget everything about what you just did, because it is useless. What? Yugo smiled at the disbelieving and flustered look on his face. You'll notice that most seals require a complex stream of special symbols ordered in exactly the right place. That makes even the simplest of things, like sealing a kunai, a lengthy task. This is the reason that most shinobi all over the world do not bother with Fuuinjutsu. However, it is little known that there is another method. Yugo began explaining. There is one symbol amongst the millions that can be used in almost every seal that someone makes. That symbol is the circle. Yugo paused for a moment, looking at Naruto seriously. The Yondaime Hokage discovered this not too long before he died. This is a very well-kept Konoha secret. Even here there are only but a select few who know. I trust you won't reveal it to anyone? Her voice suddenly took a foreboding tone. Got it, Naruto said, slightly shaken. This is important, he thought. A circle represents eternity. For example, when looking at a square you can easily pick an edge to start at, and that same edge will be where you end at when tracing it. When you look at a circle, there is no specific starting point and no specific ending point. Do you understand? Naruto nodded in affirmation. There was no beginning, there was no end. In common Fuuinjutsu, circles were rarely used because of that philosophy. If there is no end, then will not our energy diminish endlessly, until we ourselves meet our end? And it was true, because their chakra would be drained until there was nothing left. That was the common outcome when someone attempted using circles. But, the Yondaime used the same thought pattern, and completely, and secretly, turned Fuuinjutsu on its heels. Yugo explained further. Furthermore, there is the paradox of no beginning and no end. Everything must begin, and everything must end. That is life. Circles must be drawn, and wherever they begin, that is where they must end. In the end, eternity is just a word, it cannot exist in real life. Now, relating this to common Fuuinjutsu, in order for the control symbol I'm assuming you know what that is. Yugo interrupted herself. Naruto nodded once more. It's the most important part of any seal. The seal requires the control symbol in order to function. Naruto explained. Correct. Yugo said, but, it's also the weakest symbol in a seal. It is not self-supporting, and the only way it will survive is with the support of the other symbols which are more powerful. However, include no control symbol, and the seal will just fall apart. The idea is very much like chakra control. Now, as I was saying, in order for the control symbol to function, it needs the support of the other symbols in the seal. They provide the power, and the control directs it accordingly. Thus, the seal will work for as long as there is chakra in the system. Now, in the style of Fuuinjutsu that I am teaching you, the only symbols used are the control symbol and circle. But there is one very important question. How are circles used? Naruto waited for Yugo to answer, but realized that she was waiting for him to answer. He racked his brain for a suitable answer, and he got it. Eternity does exist in real life, and it's not even a circle. Naruto said, realizing what Yugo was trying to tell him. Oh, and what is it? Yugo asked, smirking back at him. Time. When you think about it, there was no way that time can begin. If we say time began, then what was before time? Only more time. And even after we die, time will continue to exist. But time isn't circular, because it doesn't overlap itself. It will continue on forever. Naruto said confidently. His confidence only went up when Yugo smiled. Almost. Time is not the perfect example, but it will suffice. Now, ignoring the fact that time does not operate in a circular pattern, we can still explain eternity through it. When looking at time, you can see that time that has passed by no longer exists. What was once this minute, is now 1 minute ago. That 1 minute existed, but is no longer accessible, meaning that from now on, it does not exist nor will it ever exist again. Do you understand? Yugo looked at him. Naruto frowned in concentration. Yugo smiled at his plight. This theory was extremely difficult to grasp for most adults, let alone a 7-year-old child. But, if time isn't circular, then how can we use circles and seals? Naruto asked. This is extremely difficult, Uzumaki-san. Perhaps we should just leave the theory until you are older, and just skip to the application. Yugo said. Genius or not, these were advanced ways of thinking. For Uzumaki Naruto to already know as much as he did was extraordinary, but this would be a bit too advanced even for him. No, I understand what you mean about time. But time isn't circular, but we want to use it because it represents eternity. We can't draw a never-ending line in a seal, that's why we use circles. So how do we apply that concept to circles? Naruto said. Yugo smiled, and inwardly sighed. I really should stop underestimating him. But, I never expected him to understand. I wanted to test his intelligence, but he understood it even better than I did when I first studied it, and he's only 7. The best way to explain it is to think of how shinobi use chakra over a given amount of time. For example, think of the Kaden, Housenka no Jutsu, which fires out multiple fireballs. When a shinobi spits out these fireballs, they fly in one direction, straight at the direction the shinobi aimed for. When using this jutsu, a shinobi must concentrate their chakra to form in short bursts in order to form fireballs, or else the technique would backfire. As the chakra moves over a distance, it exists at one point for one instance of time, before moving on. Because the path of the fireballs is a straight line, they will continue to go straight and disperse upon contact. But, if we somehow changed this path to be circular, then the fireball would move in a circular path, and would, theoretically, continue moving in the circle until interrupted or until the chakra dies out. Yugo continued to explain, do you understand now, Uzumaki-san? Naruto closed his eyes and scrunched his face in thought. Call me Naruto, he muttered, absent-mindedly. Yugo was at a loss of words. Her mouth was open as if to speak, but no words would come. Is he beginning to accept me already? She was thinking. She shut her mouth, and regarded his pondering face. His face was slightly tanned, which was rather rare to see in Konoha. His eyes, though she couldn't see them at the moment, were an astonishing cerulean. He looked very much like a younger, tanner Yondaime Hokage with whiskers, Yugo noted. 6 whisker-like marks adorned his face, 3 on both cheeks. She looked closely at his whiskers, and regarded that to a stranger, they would seem drawn on. Yet as she looked closely, there were grooves in his skin where the marks seemed drawn, though, strangely, they didn't seem as evident on his face as they had prior to the Forbidden Scroll fiasco. These were no doubt the result of having the Kyuubi sealed in him. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he grinned. Yugo, to her credit, didn't react this time. She continued to look at him. Got it, he said. Yugo raised an eyebrow. Oh, would you care to explain? She asked, amused. The circle we draw is the path. The power for the control symbol is our chakra. As our chakra will continue to go in a circular motion, the control symbol will continue to sustain itself using our chakra as a medium. Yugo sighed. Well, you've effectively just shaved off a lot of lessons, Naruto-san. Then she smiled softly. Well, at least now we can go straight to the fun stuff. Naruto grinned back at her. And, he oddly found that he really didn't have to force it. She's not so bad. I feel as if I can trust her, he thought, strangely happy. Over the next few weeks, Naruto learned many different things from Yugo concerning Fuuinjutsu. Yugo would meet him once or twice a week to teach him different aspects, and he would be given the whole week to try to learn whatever lesson she would try to teach. To Naruto's frustration and joy, these lessons were anything but easy. It would usually take him until just before the next lesson to learn what he was supposed. Yugo, while not an especially harsh teacher, was very expectant and demanding. But Naruto, instead of resenting it, embraced the challenge and worked diligently to learn everything she taught. However, the pressure and frustration was building up. For one thing, Ichiraku was receiving many customers, thanks to Yugo's help. But because of the sudden influx of customers, Naruto rarely got a chance to eat there, let alone drop by for a chat. He also rarely saw Ayame anymore. Having to juggle school and working in the stand with her father, Ayame had no time to just lay down with him on the grass and gaze at the clouds like she used to, or go for a run around in the parks and generally play around like siblings would. Granted, from what he observed, most siblings were at each other's throats, but that was irrelevant. Meanwhile, to Yugo's joy, it seemed that she and Naruto got closer with every lesson she gave. She could now say his name informally in front of him without any awkwardness on either part, and Naruto had even once called her Yugo Nichan absent-mindedly, though he didn't realize it. The Sandaime Hokage had given her 3 months leave from Anbu missions upon her request. She confided to her leader the intentions that she had, and he allowed her the extension. Depending on injuries, high-level shinobi received a certain amount of time for healing and recuperation, as well as training time to get back in shape before taking more high-level missions. The thought of turning to another for help was rare for many shinobi, but what many shinobi didn't realize was that aside from managing the village, the Hokage was someone they could turn to in times of strife. The Hokage would naturally be obliged to give an ear to a shinobi with a problem. A Hokage was someone that each and every shinobi should be able to turn to. The Sandaime Hokage of Konoha was an old and experienced leader, and so he could offer many different types of advice to ailing shinobi. However, despite this, many shinobi still avoided his help, lest he think them weak. Yugo was one of the few who could throw away her pride and go to him in her times of need. Few people were skilled enough to truly hide their intentions from the Sandaime upon close scrutiny. Yugo, despite having learned to be as emotionless as possible in the Anbu, was not an exception. It surprised her that Gensei could have done that, but his skills were geared towards deception, considering that he was a spy. However, Yugo suspected that there was more to it than that. Gensei's real intention was to steal the Forbidden Scroll. If he had been a half-wit spy, he would have requested to guard the scroll. Of course, he was not stupid. A true spy disguised his lies in truths. Gensei had truthfully not intended to harm Naruto, until Naruto stabbed him in the back, pun intended. Yugo doubted that anyone looking to pass on their skills wouldn't want Naruto as their student. That is, anyone that didn't know or didn't care about the Kyuubi. Naruto was an extraordinary student that picked up things with the speed of a Sharingan. It was a very satisfactory feeling to have such excelling students. The other factor was Naruto himself. She knew that it was probably one of the many regrets of the Sandaime that weighed heavily on his mind. The abhorrence of the demon container was common among civilians and shinobi alike. Yugo herself had been one of them not too long ago, disgusted as she was to admit it. But there really was nothing that the Sandaime could do. He had prevented physical harm to come to Naruto, but he could not force anyone to like him. This was probably the reason that the Sandaime had allowed Naruto to be supervised by an almost complete stranger. And perhaps the saddest thing of all was the likeliness that Naruto could have had a better life on the run with the spy rather than in the village. Yugo swore to rectify that. Considering the nature of shinobi, Yugo was supposed to be a heartless tool wielded to maim and kill. This ideal existed across the shinobi nations and in Konoha as well. Yugo, however, had her own ideals. She had been a naive genin at the time, but she had once sworn to never become a heartless killer. She had wanted to walk down the path where she could keep her heart, where she could keep her love for her fellow human while still being a shinobi. It wasn't an easy ideal to live by, but anything that was worth something in life was never easy to maintain. Staying in the Anbu, where all of the shinobi shielded their hearts and were supposed to be essentially cold-blooded killers, was one of the hardest things Yugo had done. She hadn't escaped it completely. Much to her dismay, she found it hard to truly interact with other people after joining up. But she hadn't lost herself completely. She still cared for her fellow shinobi, her team. And since her life had been saved by Naruto, she had been trying her hardest to become what she once was. And that boy, Naruto. He was intelligent. He was genius. The rate at which he picked up Fuuinjutsu was nothing short of miraculous. Yugo herself was considered to be a genius at the art, within special circles, of course, and even she couldn't hold a candle to some of the legendary shinobi, such as the legendary three, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru, and, of course, the Yondaime Hokage. Naruto was half her age when she first started picking up Fuuinjutsu, and she was sure that given a few years, he would be at a level beyond even her. Yugo wasn't sure if the boy was made for the art, or if the art was made for the boy. His progress was spectacular, and Yugo felt very proud of him. One thing that did bother her, outside of Naruto's Fuuinjutsu training that is, was his lack of a social life. Never once did she see him with friends his own age. The only child that she had seen Naruto ever interact with was Ayame, and though Yugo could see how much Naruto truly loved and cared for Ayame, something she hoped to gain for herself. But not everyone important in his life should be as close as a brother or sister. There was an importance to friends, to comrades. Konoha highly emphasized teamwork for a reason. And the best solution that Yugo could see? The Ninja Academy. Naruto. Naruto jerked awake at the pounding at his door, disoriented at the sudden wake-up call. Shaking the sleep away, Naruto rushed to the door, still being pounded upon by Ayame. When he opened it, a teary-eyed Ayame rushed at him and gathered him into a desperate hug, surprising the blonde. "Ayame Nichan? You have to come quick," Ayame told him, despair in her voice. Naruto's heart lurched at the sound. "What's wrong?" he asked urgently. His mind went a million miles a second, thinking up situations upon situations of misfortunes that may have befallen upon the girl. He had to forcibly clear his head to focus on the girl's next words. "Tucson, he collapsed. He's in the hospital." "I'm fine, Naruto," Tucci told the blonde gruffly as he went about setting up the stand for the day. His collapse hadn't been too serious, so the doctor had already given him leave, with a warning to take it easy. "But you should take it easy," Naruto said worriedly. "The doctor said that it's unhealthy to keep working yourself to exhaustion." Ayame tentatively turned to Yugo. Yugo Nichan, exactly what do you have in mind to save the stand?" Ayame asked her. Yugo looked at the girl momentarily, slightly surprised at the familiarity she was showing before replying. "Your father and I had struck up a deal," Yugo told her. What the stand needed was something different, something new that would attract customers again. "I came up with the idea of ramen to go," Yugo continued, "something light, easy to make and eat, cheap to buy, and something that customers could take with them rather than having to sit in and eat. There isn't a lot of room in the stand for a large volume of customers, and that's why you were losing a lot of them. They didn't want to wait for so long. With ramen to go, they have a cheap alternative." Yugo told her, "With ramen to go, you'll receive those customers back. I've been advertising this new product, putting up posters and handing out flyers when I can. There still remains one problem," Tucci said, giving them a knowing look. "I can't handle so many customers by myself in my condition, even with your help, Ayame. He can't handle so many people by himself now that he's so weak, and Ayame Nichan has school. But even working together, there's little they can do," Naruto thought. Naruto gripped the top of his head in frustration. Tucci, Ayame, and Yugo regarded him sadly. Even in the hands of defeat, he still tried to keep going. The one thing they need most is more workers, but how would they get some at such short notice? They'd need so many extra hands and, wait. Naruto paused. He removed his hands from his head, and looked at them with wide eyes. "Jensei. Thanks, dude," and he grinned. The three other occupants inside the stand looked at him expectantly, waiting for his suggestion. Yugo wondered what kind of plan the intelligent blonde had cooked up. "Tucci-oken, you need some extra helping hands. Teach me to make ramen," Naruto said with a confident smirk on his face. "What are you on about, Naruto? I don't have enough time to teach you to make ramen at the Ichiraku standard, and even you won't be enough help," Tucci told him. Instead of being downcast, Naruto smirked even more. "I'm more than enough," he said, before making a cross-shaped seal with his hands. Yugo glanced at him, surprised beyond belief. He knows this jutsu. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In a poof of smoke, 4 other Narutos appeared beside him, 2 on each side. "I can be as many workers as you want me to be," Naruto said. Tucci looked at the display with a wondrous expression on his face. Ayame poked at one of the clones, surprised at their solid state. "They're all solid?" The clone poked her back, and stuck his tongue out at her. She harumphed. That is amazing, Naruto. But, I still don't have the time to teach you how to make ramen," Tucci said. "Everything that the clones learn, I learn automatically. So if you taught me and 4 clones how to make ramen, I could learn it in 1/5 of the time," Naruto explained, "and I'm pretty sure that I can make up to 50 clones." Yugo spoke up. "Naruto-kun, exactly what do you mean by that? Learning what your clones learn?" she asked. Yugo knew the technique, but she didn't know what he was talking about. I noticed it the first time I used Cage Bunshin successfully. Jensei had taught me, and after my clones were dispelled, for some reason, I remembered looking at him from 5 different angles at the same time. It seemed a little weird at the time, but I forgot about it until now, considering what happened. But when I think about it, it makes sense. Cage Bunshin works by splitting your chakra. When it dispels, your chakra comes back, and everything it experienced mentally will be as if you experienced it. Naruto explained. Now that I think about it, it is true. All those times that I used Cage Bunshin, I can remember doing things twice. He has an extraordinarily detailed mind, if he can notice something as small as looking at someone from different perspectives. Yugo thought, feeling amazed at the revelation. Wait, did you say you can make up to 50 clones? Yugo asked him, as Naruto's clones dispelled. Yeah, I have a lot of chakra for some reason. Naruto said, frowning softly. Yugo immediately understood why that was. Jinchuriki. HMPH. Well, if you're so keen on helping, then let's get started right away. Tucci said, Ayame, you can help too. Ayame nodded determinedly. She would do her part to save her stand. Come on, Naruto. Let's get started, she said. Just a sec, Ayame Nichan. Naruto replied. He looked at Yugo expectantly. Yugo was confused for a second, but then she understood what he wanted. Or she thought she did. Oh, don't worry about our lessons. We can put them on hold. Besides, with the Cage Bunshin technique, we'll be able to blaze through our lessons very quickly. She told him, but he continued to look at her expectantly. What? Now Yugo was thoroughly confused. What else does he want, if not, oh no. Oh no. Yugo desperately thought of an excuse, but Naruto thrust out his lower lip, forming an irresistible pout on his face. Not the pout. Fine, Yugo said, sighing deeply. She turned towards Tucci. I can be of assistance to you as well, Ichiraku-san. Please allow me to help. Yugo said respectfully. Inwardly, Yugo was thinking, the things I do for you, Naruto-kun. Tucci looked at her uncomfortably. Yeah, come on old man. Let her help, Naruto exclaimed. Okay, Tucci said gruffly. Naruto laughed and jumped at Yugo, engulfing her in a hug. Yugo froze momentarily before her mind caught up to her, and she quickly hugged him back before he could back away. Okay, let's get started, Naruto shouted, breaking away from Yugo. Yugo was dazed, and a strange lopsided grin adorned her pretty, feminine face. This was the first time that Naruto had ever hugged her, and it felt wonderful, like she had achieved a great accomplishment. Tucci smiled softly at her expression. Now, before we get started, I'll have to let you know that you'll have to be here early every day. I get up at 6 a.m. sharp each day to prepare. Can you manage it? Tucci asked Naruto and Yugo. 6 a.m. Naruto exclaimed in disbelief. Tucci sighed deeply. Okay, Naruto, you'll be staying with us for as long as you are helping. Azuki-san, I believe that I can count on you to be here on time each morning? Or would you like to lodge with us as well? Tucci addressed Yugo. I wouldn't want to impose. Yugo said, but Tucci waved it off. Nonsense, we'd love to have you. Besides, it would make it much easier on us all if you could be on hand on short notice. Tucci said, thank you, Ichiraku-san. Yugo said, bowing formally. She knocked Naruto on the head with her fist, before pulling him into a bow. Be polite, she hissed at her student. Ah, no need to be so formal, Azuki-san. Tucci interrupted. Yeah, it's just old man Ichiraku. Naruto chirped up, making Yugo sigh at his lack of manners. She then proceeded to make the same seal that Naruto had made earlier, and formed her chakra to make 2 Cage Bunshin. The 2 extra Yugos left the premises, sprinting off in different directions. Yugo explained that they would gather clothes for her and Naruto to the confused party. Very well. Azuki-san, you may stay in our guest room. As for you Naruto, you can stay. With me. Ayame spoke up, grinning. What, no way. I'm too old to sleep with you, Ayame Nichan. Naruto exclaimed. Ah, you'll never be too old to sleep with your big sister Ayame. She replied, which set Naruto off in another rant. You just want to use me as your teddy bear again, don't you? Yugo smiled at the 2 bickering children, feeling as she hadn't ever felt in her entire life. As an only child, she had always wished for siblings and now she felt like she had them. Ichiraku Ayame was already looking up to her as a big sister. And Naruto? If her life was in constant darkness, he was her only sunshine. Tucci and Ayame had combined their efforts to teach Naruto and Yugo how to make ramen. The student and sensei pair had both used the shadow clone technique to quicken the pace at which they learned to make ramen, and they had accomplished it in record time. It took about an hour of teaching, and in another hour, Naruto and Yugo condensed over 2 days of experimenting through the use of Kage Bunshin. While they weren't quite at the level of Tucci or Ayame, who had been making ramen for many years, Tucci had deemed their ramen skills acceptable for Ichiraku standards. Currently, a group of Narutos were setting up the stand, while another Naruto was talking with Yugo. Really, she had no idea which Naruto was the real one, as none of the Narutos were bossing the others around. They all acted identical, and either when they spoke, they all spoke in unison, or none spoke in unison. He really knew how to use this technique properly, and Yugo was glad. The good thing about Kage Bunshin was that they knew everything that you did up until the point that they were formed. Ayame had already left for school accompanied by a Yugo clone. She hadn't wanted to go, but Tucci had insisted, saying that he already had an army of ramen makers at his disposal, and Tucci was currently getting ready for the day. The purple-headed beauty was listening to the cute blonde boy's ideas for Fuuinjutsu applications. He always had some ridiculous ideas. Yugo had learned early on that he was very imaginative. He usually gave up when she shot down his more ridiculous ideas, but today, he seemed very keen on this particular idea. Circular seals were meant to be easy make fast action seals, but what Naruto was suggesting would revolutionize the art of Fuuinjutsu. The only downside to it was that it was practically impossible to accomplish. The major aspect that the traditional and Yondaime improved styles of Fuuinjutsu shared was that both required the use of ink. Seals had to be drawn no matter what, it didn't necessarily have to be on paper scrolls. Paper scrolls were more widely used because they were compact, and had even surface areas, and were therefore easier to use than, say, the terrain. Naruto's idea was to draw both the circles and control symbols using one's chakra. Yugo had explained to him the absurdity of it. Perhaps someone with the chakra control of a medic nin might be able to draw a circle with their chakra, but to draw something as complex as a control symbol with just chakra required chakra control that even medics didn't have. Naruto countered with the idea that someone could force their chakra to form the shape of the control symbol. Control symbols didn't have to be remarkably accurate. That was one of the things that made the circular method of Fuuinjutsu so much quicker. Sure, the more precise, the better the effect, but it wasn't necessary. Naruto-kun, while you may have a point there, forcing your chakra into a particular shape isn't an easy task. The first problem is that chakra control is useless if you're trying to force your chakra into shapes. The second problem is that even if you did force your chakra to make a seal, it would just fade away. Chakra doesn't stay in a single form for very long. It could take hundreds of years to accomplish something like this. Yugo explained soothingly. Naruto grew silent at her explanation, and Yugo felt guilty for disproving his idea. She didn't know what it was about him, but she always hated to prove his ideas faulty. As an ANBU, Yugo was taught to always think logically. Naruto's ideas were contrary to logic, yet Yugo could not help but believe in him, especially when he was so passionate about it. No, Naruto suddenly spoke up. Yugo gave him a questioning look. This idea, I won't give it up. I don't care if it takes me 1,000 years to do it. I'm getting this feeling, I can't disregard this. I don't care if I have to train with Kage Bunshin every day to do it, but I have to accomplish this. Naruto said, suddenly determined. Yugo smiled at his sudden determination. Where does he get it, his fortitude, she thought to herself. She had never seen anything like it before, such a resolve. It was just there, and Yugo felt as if she could draw strength from it. Yugo's relationship with Naruto had skyrocketed in the 2 months that she had spent teaching him, and though it had reached the point where she truly felt that they were like brother and sister, it was still slightly standoffish. Every day that she had spent with him, whether it was teaching him Fuuinjutsu or just spending time with him casually, she felt a feeling inside her grow. A certain fondness, but she hadn't really identified it. While Yugo had strived to be a big sister for Naruto, one that he could rely on for things that he couldn't turn to Ayame for, there was still something that she hadn't realized. To truly be to him what she wanted, like what a Yame was, she had to love him. And she found that she did. And so, Yugo suddenly knew what she had to do. Very well, Yugo replied, kneeling in front of him. Naruto blinked in surprise. Yugo smiled sincerely at him, putting all her heart into it. In that one moment, for this one moment, she threw away everything that being Anbu taught her, that being a kunoichi taught her, and as a human put all her heart into it, all the love she could muster. Yugo put her hands on his shoulders and said, I believe in you. I believe you can do it, Naruto, and if you need me I'll be there for you every step of the way. Yugo leaned forward, slightly blushing, and placed a kiss on his forehead. She looked at him lovingly as he blinked owlishly. I haven't said it before, but I'm proud of you. As a teacher, and as someone that loves you. Yugo told him, and she meant every word. Naruto couldn't finish his thought. She said that she loved him. She loved him. As far as he knew, the only person that had ever loved him was a Yame. And Naruto remembered all the things that Yugo did, everything that he thought was part of a plan, of an ulterior motive, something that she wanted from him. Now, all of her actions made a bit more sense. It wasn't about what she wanted from him. It was about what she wanted to be for him. But could he? Last time, he thought she loved him, so he loved her, but would Yugo be the same? There were so many similarities. No, Yugo was different. Yugo wouldn't hurt him. Yugo saved his life. She didn't try to take it. He could trust her. He would trust her. Yugo Nichan, Naruto said. He found that his eyes were suspiciously wet. I love you too. Naruto didn't say. As much as he wanted them to, he found that they would not form. But it seemed that Yugo understood what was left unsaid, as she wrapped him up tightly in her arms, and clung to him desperately as if he were her last lifeline. And Naruto held onto her, conveying through his grip what he could not say. It seemed like hours that they held onto each other, tears streaming silently down their faces. They were brother and sister in all but blood, yet blood couldn't mean less. Tucci's voice called to them from the stand, indicating their first customers. The newly found siblings broke apart to go help. Come on, Yugo Nichan. I can't wait to see you in that hat. Naruto said, running off to start up the first batch. Yugo smiled at him as he ran off, wiping the excess tears from her eyes. Uzumaki Naruto, my little brother. Yugo thought to herself, feeling exultant. She had never felt so terrific. It was as if all her previous accomplishments, making Genin, making Chunin, making Anbu, were worthless in light of this new one. She felt truly strong. She felt as if she truly understood what the Hokage meant when he talked about Wall of Fire. It was then when she recalled Naruto's words. Hat? Naruto lay on the couch, breathing heavily. It had been a long 2 days, and he had expended most of his chakra creating Kage Bunshin. He was waiting for Yugo, who was currently taking a shower. Ayame sat beside him, already showered, but quite tired herself. She had to pitch in at the stand after school, and even then they barely came out on top. Yugo certainly hadn't spared any expense on advertising the stand. Naruto was pushed to his limits for the second day. Naruto was young, and he had enough chakra control to make the regular Bunshin technique, but it still wasn't all that great, considering the amount of chakra that he had. He must have made close to 100 clones on the second day alone, really pushing his chakra and chakra control to his limits. Yugo had it much easier, seeing as she had excellent control, and wasted virtually zero chakra in making her clones, meaning that they last a long time. She was a trained shinobi as well, so her movements were much more efficient than his, and she just seemed better at making ramen than he was. Naruto claimed that it was probably because she was a girl, and then both Ayame and Yugo had smacked him on his head, much to the amusement of the customers. Naruto-kun, go ahead. Yugo snapped him from his thoughts. She was wearing regular civilian clothes with a flower pattern, purple to match her hair. And her purple hair was wrapped up in a towel. Even she looked slightly tired. Naruto sighed, and reluctantly got up from the comfy couch to take a shower. At least the hot water would be comfortable. Ayame smirked at his weariness, no doubt having mischievous thoughts. You seem tired, Naruto-chan. Want me to give you a bath like old times? She said, anticipating his reaction. Naruto flinched. He tried to leave before Yugo spoke, but he was too slow. You used to bathe him? Yugo asked, clearly amused. As Ayame relayed the old story of how she hid Naruto in her room when they were younger to Yugo, Naruto's face reddened in embarrassment as he ran to the bath, covering his ears. Might as well get used to it, he thought grimly, as he heard Yugo and Ayame laughing together at, no doubt, his expense. With two big sisters now, I'll be embarrassed forever. Damn, damn, damn. Naruto thought to himself frantically, as he and his Kage Bunshin worked feverishly on making several different types of ramen simultaneously. Naruto poured the noodles into a disposable container and snapped a lid labeled, Ichiraku Miso Ramen, on top. Miso, he called out, placing the cup on a table at the side. Yugo, or a clone, grabbed the cup and gave it to a customer who showed his ticket for miso ramen. Tucci had suggested the idea of takeout ramen, mainly because they would be unable to accommodate every customer in their little stand. Thankfully, almost every customer seemed to like the takeout ramen, so it was a win-win situation. Therefore, Yugo, or a clone, was acting as a runner in case they needed to buy more disposable containers, and there was also a Naruto clone making labels for all the different types of ramen that was offered at Ichiraku. However, at the moment, it really did seem like an uphill battle. Both Naruto and Yugo were starting to run out of chakra. Tucci was even more tired than them, having to constantly monitor the soup. Ayame was still at school as Tucci had been adamant about her not skipping out on school. They needed more people. Naruto closed his eyes in frustration. Where would they be able to get someone on such short notice? It seemed impossible, but it had to be done. Ah, what the hell? Naruto created a Kage Bunshin to take his place and staggered to the front, looking around at the street. He spotted a man who seemed to be around Yugo's age, and, feeling desperate, called out. He was dressed in a typical Konoha shinobi uniform complete with vest, signifying that he was at the very least a chunin. Oddly, he was not paying any attention to his surroundings, as his only eye was reading a book. His other eye was covered up by his official Konoha Hite 8, which signified his supposed allegiance to Konoha. He also had a mask covering the rest of his face. "Hey you!" he yelled, pointing at the man. The man in question looked up from his book at the shout, as he spotted Naruto. He looked behind him, thinking that perhaps Naruto was yelling at someone behind him, but Naruto interrupted him. "You with the weird haircut?" This time, the one-eyed man pointed to himself unsurely as if to ask, "Me?" and Naruto affirmed his unspoken question. "Yeah, you. Come here, and put that book away." Naruto ordered, and the man surprisingly obeyed, placing the book in his kunai pouch. "Yes? What do you want?" the man said, looking at Naruto. He didn't show any signs of knowing whom he was talking to. "Are you looking for a job?" Naruto asked him. The man lazily regarded him for a second before answering. "No," the man started, but Naruto interrupted him saying, "Okay, you're hired." The silver-haired man blinked, before shrugging and following Naruto into the stand. There he observed the several solid Naruto clones slaving away at making some ramen, and a few Yugo clones helping out here or there. When Yugo, or a clone, spotted the man, her eyes widened in surprise, and she blushed from embarrassment. "Yugo Ni-chan, I got someone to work for us," Naruto informed her, or her clone. "Yugo Ni-chan?" the man spoke in a questioning voice. Yugo put a hand to her face. "Oi, what's your name?" Naruto asked the one-eyed man. The man looked from Yugo to him before replying, "Hitaki Kakashi." "Okay, Hitaki, I don't like you, and you don't like me, but," Kakashi interrupted Naruto's speech. "Why don't you like me? I'm sure you'd like me if you took the chance to get to know me," Kakashi remarked innocently. Naruto frowned at him, before opening his mouth to reply, but Yugo interrupted them. "No, please don't, Kakashi-senpai, let's not do this now. If you're really going to help, then please use your copying skills to learn to make ramen and help out. If not, then we are too busy," she said to Kakashi, before barking at Naruto. "Naruto, stay focused." Naruto blanched, hastily creating another Kage Bunshin which ran off to replace one that had dispelled. "Well, how can I refuse my cute subordinate?" Kakashi said, chuckling as he pulled up his Hite 8 and regarded two pairs of Yugos making the different kinds of ramen that Ichiraku had on its menu. Naruto frowned at him again, before pointing at him. "I bet you just want to see Yugo Ni-chan work in that outfit, you pervert," Naruto exclaimed, suddenly. Yugo bashed his head with her fist, telling him to go back to work, and Naruto went back, rubbing his head and muttering all the way, but Kakashi did notice her give him a suspicious glance. She believed him, he thought, sweat dropping. He went forward to wash his hands and help make some ramen. He had learned to make several different kinds of ramen at a glance. Though I've never seen her so open. The only person that could have done that would be Naruto. He really is his mother's son. Naruto watched Kakashi as he made a single kage bunshin and approached the back. His jaw then dropped in amazement as Kakashi's hands blurred, and a second later there were 5 orders of ramen all packed and ready to go. What the hell? The other Kakashi went over towards Tucci, who blinked in confusion as Kakashi basically took over and started making ramen of the same quality that he made it at over 3 times the speed. Yugo shook her head in amusement. Kakashi was the same from when she knew him, that was for sure. Hitaki Kakashi, the famous, and in some cases infamous, copy ninja who had copied over 1,000 techniques. Yugo had known him from when she was a rookie Anbu. He had often been her squad leader, which was odd because he wasn't an Anbu at the time. No, he had been squad leader even though he was a Junin, but even then any teams he led never failed missions. He was often labeled the best Junin in all of Konoha, and Yugo found no fault in that. Kakashi truly was on another level, even without the use of his implanted Sharingan. Something that irked the Uchiha clan to no end. Speaking of which, Yugo wondered what the Uchiha clan, or the remnants, rather, would think of their prized dojutsu being used to make ramen. She found it to be terribly amusing. Naruto, on the other hand, watched Kakashi in awe. I sure chose a hell of a guy, he thought to himself. Needless to say, with the help of the awe-inspiring ramen-making skills of Hitaki Kakashi, the rest of the day had went by much easier than before. As they closed up the stand, everyone was all smiles. Nobody could really tell with Kakashi, though they were still tired. Kakashi, by whom the day had been saved, was thanked by everyone, even a reluctant Naruto, who had said that he was an okay guy, for a pervert. Of course, even though both Yugo and Tucci had told him that Kakashi was trustworthy, Naruto still wouldn't let him near Yondaime. Are you going to stay for dinner, Kakashi? Tucci asked him. Tucci had known Kakashi since he was a little boy. He was actually still a Junin at the time, of 12. It was hard not to, as Kakashi was the Yondaime Hokage's student. And Minato was constantly at Ichiraku because Kushina was always at Ichiraku. Kakashi had been quite the irritating boy when he was younger, but he had relaxed and Tucci was glad for that. No, I should be getting home. It's been a long day, and I want to read some I want to get to sleep a little early tonight. Kakashi had changed what he was going to say when he saw a strange glint in Yugo's eyes. What was it with women and Icha? Okay, said Naruto, we open at 7 AM, so you'd better be here, okay. Kakashi smiled, and waved his hand. Sure thing, boss. Later, he said, before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Yugo smiled in amusement. Elite Junin or not, he sure was an amusing man. Unfortunately for Yugo, she did not remember Kakashi's lack of punctuality. Where the hell is he? Naruto screamed. He was, of course, referring to Kakashi, who was 2 hours late. Yugo groaned. She had totally forgotten about this habit of his. He had always been late to team meetings, but never missions, though no shinobi that knew of his status had the guts to tell him off. At first, she was also scared of telling him off, but after working with him for so long she had eventually gotten used to it. Thankfully, there was nowhere near as much rush as the first 3 days. Of course, that still didn't mean that it was particularly easy for them. But Naruto had assured everyone that most of these customers probably just saw the commotion and had decided to eat there to see what the fuss was about. The business would die down to respectable levels, not too low, but enough that Tucci would be able to handle the stand on his own without suffering financially. And with Naruto's new invention, it would be very easy for him. The previous night, Naruto had designed a seal that would basically rotate the contents of any single container in either a clockwise or counterclockwise rotation. He then applied those seals to Tucci's giant pots in which the broth for the ramen was made, and thus, the self-stirring pots had been made. Tucci had been so amazed that he had promised Naruto a month's worth of free ramen. Naruto had been delighted at the thought of free ramen for a month, as had Yugo, who had begun fearing for her money. But Yugo was happy that Naruto had taken her teachings to heart. She hadn't really taught him the common style of Fuuinjutsu, instead focusing on the circular method. But Naruto had taken what she taught him, and applied it using the regular method of Fuuinjutsu, which lasted much longer than the circular method. It was quite an extraordinary feat for a 7-year-old, and though she resented herself for it, Yugo felt slightly jealous at Naruto's aptitude at the art. It was unnatural how quickly Naruto had taken to the art. Quite like a fish to water. "Oi, Naruto, all the customers are gone. Take the front stand me," Tucci called, as a woman who had her purple hair tied in a rough ponytail sat down and placed her head in her arms on the counter. Naruto saluted Tucci in a joking manner before going to the front. "Can I take your order?" Naruto asked politely, feeling slightly nervous. This woman seemed familiar, but he wasn't too sure as he had not seen her face. "Gimme a miso ramen," the woman said. Her voice was slightly muffled because her head was in her arms, but Naruto recognized it, as he started shaking horribly. No, it wasn't her, it couldn't be her. Yugo looked at him in confusion. She had never seen Naruto in such a traumatized state before, even during the Gensei incident. "Oi, I said I want to so." Mitarashi Anko lifted her head from her arms and lazily looked at the upset boy in front of her. Her eyes widened in surprise, and her jaw dropped slightly. "Naruto," she whispered. Her hands shook slightly. Naruto looked at her face with terror apparent on his face, as he yelped and staggered back, falling onto his backside. But he didn't try to get up again, as his body wouldn't stop shaking. Stop, it hurts." Memories that Naruto had long buried came rushing forward at the sight of this woman in front of him. Things that he had never wanted to remember. She was tossing and turning in her bed, moaning in pain. Her hand was clutching a spot on her neck, near her left shoulder. She was gritting her teeth in pain as her memories consumed her. Her screams of pain had woken him, and he had sleepily gone into her room to see what was wrong. "Anko ne, what's wrong?" a 4-year-old Naruto asked as he rubbed his eyes sleepily. "No," she weakly moaned, "stay away." "Anko ne?" Naruto said, confused. Anko was always delighted when he was around, and she had always wanted to be with him as much as possible. Of course, he was a 4-year-old and would often go off gallivanting alone. "Seneashu." Snakes came from the darkness, lashing out at him. Naruto cried out in shock and pain. It hurt. Why did Anko ne hurt him? She promised. Why, so much pain? She promised that she would never hurt him. She promised that she would always love him. Why does it hurt? Why? These were the thoughts going through Naruto's mind as he passed out, dropping to the ground bleeding profusely from his neck. Why was she here? She wasn't allowed to come near him, the Hokage said so. Naruto. Anko started desperately, reaching her hand out towards him. "Snake's blood pain hurts." Naruto screamed in fright as he pushed away from her into the wall. He didn't seem to notice that he had hit the wall because he kept pushing away, desperate to put more space between him and Anko. Yugo was by his side in an instant. "Naruto, what's wrong?" she said, extremely worried. "What is going on?" Yugo yelled in her mind. Seeing as Naruto wouldn't stop shaking or crying, Yugo gathered him in her warm embrace, and whispered soothing words into his ears. She could feel his shaking starting to lessen. Anko retracted her hand, as she watched the pair in front of her feeling a horrible wrench in her chest. She had hated herself ever since that night, and to this day she didn't stop hating herself. Also, she had never stopped loving him, even though he didn't love her anymore. It hurt her to think that, but she knew that she deserved the pain. The Hokage had been furious with her after she had come to her senses and took Naruto to the hospital. Naruto was instantly taken from her care. She had been devastated, and tried to argue against the Sandame's decision, but after Naruto's initial reaction to her presence she had given in. She had then promised the Hokage that she wouldn't actively try to confront Naruto, and she hadn't. This was the first time that she had actually met him since the incident, though she did spy on him whenever she could. When she had heard what had happened to him by his previous caretaker, Gensei, she had been furious with both the Hokage and herself for not being there for him. But the Hokage had sharply reprimanded her, and again, she let go of the issue. After Orochimaru had left her to die, she had been distraught, but she had gone back to Konoha to serve her village and to get stronger with a new goal in mind, to kill her former master. Sadly, only a few shinobi acknowledged her. Most of them no doubt associated her with the tainted Orochimaru, though none went so far as to provoke her. When the Kyuubi was sealed into Naruto, she had sympathized with the baby, understanding the scorn that he would no doubt receive from the village. After Naruto's mother had died unexpectedly, she did not know the cause. She had thought of raising him, but decided that she was ill-prepared for raising a child. When he was older, she had caught him being kicked around by a few civilian kids and had decided then and there that she would take him in. The Hokage had understood her reasons and allowed it. And she did care for him. She loved him as if he were her son, as if he were her baby brother. The two were even somewhat alike. She was scorned by many shinobi. Most civilians didn't know of her connection to Orochimaru, and he was scorned by both the shinobi and villagers alike. It had been glorious for the time it had lasted. But she messed it up, and it would likely forever leave a hole in her heart. She loved him so much. The guilt, the shame had threatened to envelop her, but her memories kept her mostly sane and somewhat alive. Naru, Anko started again, but a hand gripped her shoulder, and she whirled around only to look at a serious-faced Kakashi. He shook his head sadly and quietly said, "I think it's best that you leave now." Anko gave Naruto one last desperate teary-eyed look, before bouncing off down the streets and across rooftops. Kakashi sighed, as he walked into the stand. Yugo glanced at him, clearly confused. "You should probably take him inside, Yugo. I can handle things here," Kakashi told her quietly. He looked sadly at Naruto, who had stopped shaking but was still in a catatonic state. Yugo easily picked up the anguished boy and took him inside. But she did give Kakashi a momentary look before she left, no doubt wanting answers. Kakashi sighed again. It would be a long day. The day after the incident with Anko, Naruto had felt okay enough help out in the stand, but it really wasn't needed as the amount of customers had died down to acceptable levels for Tucci to handle on his own. They had celebrated, of course, though it was noticeably subdued. Naruto tried to be as happy as possible, but everyone noticed how strained his grins were. It was obvious that he still remembered. To take his mind off his bad memories, Yugo started teaching him again, and this time she was much more active in doing so. Previously she would just give him a lesson once a week and would reluctantly leave him to his own devices. He preferred it like that. But now that their relationship and situation had changed, and she couldn't bear to leave him when he was like this. Inwardly, she cursed Mitarashi Anko for being unable to control herself, but she did feel sorry for her. Kakashi had explained what happened, how much Anko had truly loved the boy. Yugo couldn't help but put herself in the same situation as Anko, and she felt lost at even the thought of losing Naruto's trust. Currently, she watched the dozens of Narutos trying to form their chakra to take the shape of a control seal. He had not forgotten his endeavor of forming seals using only his chakra. Together, they had worked on creating a control seal. Basically a seal that would help to regulate chakra, or in other words, artificial perfect chakra control. It wasn't easy, but between the two of them they had been able to make one. This seal didn't exactly gift someone with perfect chakra control, but it would allow a person to keep their control perfect or near perfect when using jutsu that required hand seals. It was very ingenious, but the seal would only work if the person was able to form it with their own chakra, making it useless otherwise. And seeing as nobody could actually force their chakra into such intricate shapes, though Yugo did have high hopes for Naruto, not a single person could use it. And speaking of Naruto, he had begun to use his Kage Bunshin training method almost every day, trying to force his chakra into one shape or another. Yugo told him to focus on simple things first, such as spheres and cubes. Then he could slowly progress onto harder things, like 2D shapes such as circles and squares, and then finally he would move onto lines and angles. However, after watching over 50 Narutos trying to force their chakra into the shape of a sphere, Yugo decided that he did seem lonely. While Yugo was glad to spend time with him, she was a kunoichi, and she would have to eventually go back to her duties. And Naruto couldn't spend all his time with Ayame either, as she had school. He needed to make friends of his own age. And to do that, Naruto needed to go to the academy. No matter how much more intelligent or advanced Naruto was than the other kids his own age, he was going to eventually have to work with them. It was better for him to form at least camaraderie with them, if not friendship. So Yugo approached the topic at night. As they ate dinner in his apartment, Yugo had all but moved in. She had cooked, but she was nothing special in the kitchen. And Naruto's idea of cooking was cooking ramen. Naruto-kun, do you plan on entering the academy? Yugo asked offhandedly, trying to appear nonchalant. However, Naruto looked at her suspiciously. No, he said, after swallowing, Jensei had told me that it would be of no use. He may have been the enemy, but it doesn't mean that he was wrong. I'll probably try to become a genin by just taking the exam. Yugo hummed in agreement. True, but there is a difference between the views of Jensei and the practices of Konoha. Yugo retorted. What do you mean, Nichan? Naruto asked. In all shinobi villages, teamwork is an important aspect, but Konoha emphasizes teamwork more so than most. You'll be working in teams for most of your shinobi career. Yugo told him, hoping he would get the message she was trying to convey. She wasn't disappointed. You want me to make friends? Naruto said bluntly, not skipping around the topic. Naruto, you may know the things that are necessary to make you a skilled ninja, but there are other lessons that need to be learned. The academy is a good resource for that. You may not learn anything that you think may be of use to you as a shinobi, but there is more to life than just serving your village. There are other important lessons for you to learn, things that I've learned from my own time there, lessons that I remember to this day. Yugo explained. Naruto closed his eyes and put his fingers to his chin, in the traditional thinking pose. Okay, he agreed suddenly, sign me up. Yugo blinked at his quick decision. She thought that it would have taken more persuading, but she was glad that he came to the decision on his own. She smiled at him. You've made a good decision, Naruto, she thought, as Naruto resumed eating his dinner. For a long time, she had felt as if something had been missing in her life, and now that she had found it, Yugo felt strangely happy. She knew it. Naruto would be great one day. And as his big sister, she would be his pillar. She would support him 100% of the way. Naruto opened his front door, curious as to who would be visiting him this late at night. Kaori-chan. The girl named Kaori gazed back at him quite morosely. Naruto, you guys came back. How were the Chunin exams? Naruto asked excitedly. How did you guys do? Kaori didn't reply, and Naruto's excitement died down, understanding that she may not have come by with good news. We didn't make it past the second round. Kaori told him, and, Naruto, where's Naruto-san? Naruto asked the dreaded question. At hearing Naruto's name, Kaori let out a wail and flung herself onto Naruto, desperately clinging onto him. He's gone. He's dead, and it's my fault. Kaori cried out, sinking to her knees while clutching Naruto's orange vest. The older girl buried her face into his stomach, crying into his vest. Naruto didn't comfort her. He's dead? Was all that went through Naruto's mind. He felt a deep tremor in his hands, and found that he couldn't stop them from shaking. Naruto, as well as his two teammates were genin that were 3 years Naruto's senior. Naruto would be graduating this year, and he had hoped to soon take missions with his 3 friends. Naruto had met Naruto during his first year of the academy, when Naruto had been in his last. He had been one of Naruto's few friends for the whole year. Naruto had been different from everyone else. He was kind to everyone, regardless of whom it was. Even as he befriended Naruto and others warned him to stay away, he didn't. Where anyone else might be scorned for befriending Naruto, people just admired Naruto for putting up with the brat. He was just that charismatic. So Naruto considered Naruto to be his best friend. And Naruto had always been Naruto's friend, even after he became a genin alongside his 2 teammates, Kenji and Kaori. He would often regale Naruto stories of his missions over steaming bowls of Ichiraku ramen, and the two would have a grand time. Naruto did eventually become friends with Kaori and Kenji, but it was always Naruto that was the glue that held everything together. And now, he was gone. How did it happen? Naruto asked softly, keeping his voice firm. He needed to know. Kaori didn't immediately reply, still crying into Naruto's stomach. It was a rain-nin. He was trying to kill me, but Naruto jumped in at the last second. Kunai, his throat. Kaori barely got out, gasping for breath as her tears soaked both her face and Naruto's clothes. I should have done something. I should have trained more, I should have been more careful. It should have been me. Kaori wailed despairingly. Naruto knew the risk. He didn't have to jump in. He didn't need to take the kunai for his teammate. But he did. Naruto thought to himself. This was the life of a shinobi. The risk, the dangers, the deaths. The two grieved for their lost friend well into the night. The Junin gathered had been contemplating their future genin teams that had been assigned to them when Hitaki Kakashi had spoken up. Hokage-sama, you said that I'd be getting Uchiha Sasuke regardless of what I wished, correct? Kakashi asked. The Hokage nodded in affirmation. There are several other Junin that could have been assigned to him. Members of his own family in fact. But the fact lies that you are the most skilled person in this village with the Sharingan. Uchiha Sasuke is indeed a genius, and the council believes that no Uchiha still alive has enough skill or experience to train him to his full potential. The Hokage explained. Then, I'd like to propose a trade. Kakashi said. The other Junin murmured slightly, but Kakashi didn't react at all. The Hokage looked at Kakashi for a few seconds as if waiting for an unspoken message before speaking up. And just whom do you intend to trade? The Hokage asked. But just by looking at Kakashi he already knew who it was going to be and why, and really, the Hokage already approved the idea. But, appearances had to be kept up. If possible, I'd like to trade Uzumaki Naruto for Uchiha Shinji. Kakashi said. Some of the Junin looked at him surprised, and some, the Hokage was irritated to notice with understanding. They understood nothing. What do the rest of you think? The Hokage addressed the rest of the Junin. The first to speak up was the rookie Yuhi Kurenai, who had just recently been promoted to Junin. If I may be allowed to say, Hokage-sama, it would be unbalancing for the team from which Uchiha Shinji will be traded. Uzumaki Naruto is listed as the dead last in his class, and his two teammates will be likewise. Uchiha Akane is the second worst in the class, and their final teammate, Hyuga Hikari, while not at the bottom of the class, would also suffer from their lack of skill. There's also the fact that both his teammates and sensei are female. That may also disrupt the team dynamics. Kurenai explained before turning to Kakashi directly. Kakashi, I understand why you would rather be without the dead last in your team, especially Uzumaki Naruto, but it is usually tradition that the dead last be with the top two in the class. Kakashi almost chuckled. Almost. Ah, rookies. I love them so much. So inexperienced, so foolish. Kakashi thought. Then he retorted. Uchiha Akane is Uchiha Shinji's sister. With their final teammate and their sensei both being Hyuga, it can very well be disrupting for the team dynamics. Also, having a family member and a fairly skilled one at that on his team would be good for Uchiha Sasuke's psyche and development. And lastly, even with the teams as they are, Uchiha Shinji would still be surrounded by females anyways. Anyway, that really shouldn't have anything to do with team configuration. Kakashi replied, his tone of voice never changing from bored. This time, it wasn't Kurenai that replied, but the Hokage's son, Asuma. I would say that Kurenai is right about it being unfair for Team 9. But, there's really nothing that can be done, is there? Asuma chuckled. Elite Junin get what they want. Kakashi smiled. Asuma told it like it was, and he was right. Kakashi was hailed to be the best Junin in the entire village, followed closely by Maida Guy. Asuma was also a good Junin, a veteran Junin in fact, although nowhere near Kakashi's level, and so he knew things that the pretty-eyed Kurenai wouldn't. The Hokage wouldn't refuse him, especially when the Hokage knew the true reason of why Kakashi specifically wanted Uchiha Shinji, or rather, why Kakashi wanted Naruto to go to the team that had two Hyuga in it. The main reason was basically because Naruto had successfully, after years and years of training, been able to form his chakra into the shape of seals. There were no shortcuts, no tricks. It was just many years of Kage Bunshin-style training and a lot of hard work. Of course, Naruto had still only just been able to do it. It would take a lot of work before he became a master at it. But the point was that Naruto could exert chakra from his hands in the shape of Fuuinjutsu seals. The obvious next step for Naruto would be to move on to learning ninjutsu, and have his Fuuinjutsu technique be the supplementary power to it. With this power, Naruto could very easily become one of the, if not the, best ninjutsu users to ever have lived. Kakashi could already think of many possibilities of using ninjutsu with Naruto's Fuuinjutsu technique, like using wind seals with a fire jutsu, or absorbing elemental ninjutsu techniques. And with Kakashi's help and knowledge of thousands of different jutsu, Naruto would probably be one of the best genin in the entire shinobi world. But, Kakashi had already though beyond that. There was no doubt that if Kakashi taught Naruto personally to be a ninjutsu user, Naruto would definitely be able to become Hokage, as if there was anything else the blonde would become, and live and die successfully, making quite a splash on the world. But there was another route. One that Kakashi hoped would shake the very foundations of Konoha, of Fire Country, of the shinobi world. And for that to happen, Kakashi would have to wait before he could get his hands on the aspiring genin. There was just one skill that Naruto needed to be taught, and Kakashi wasn't the person that could teach it to him. Very well. Iruka, please change the teams accordingly. The Hokage told the academy instructor, who had been watching the proceedings quietly. Yes, Hokage-sama, Iruka replied quietly, if there are no other changes, may I be excused? The Hokage nodded his assent, and the Chunin disappeared in a whirl of leaves. He then turned to Kakashi. Kakashi, I suppose you'll want to talk to the sensei of Team 9? The Hokage asked, already knowing the answer. I suppose I should, seeing as I dumped the dead last onto her team while taking her best student onto my own. Kakashi replied nonchalantly. The other Junin watched the exchange between the leader of the village and elite Junin silently. She couldn't be at this meeting due to familial reasons, but her name is Hyuga Aoi. I'll leave it to you to inform her of your reasoning behind the trade. The Hokage told him, before addressing the gathered Junin as a collective. Normally, there would only be 3 teams per class allowed to become genin apprentices. However, it has been quite a while since there has been such a promising group of shinobi that the council has allowed for 1 extra team to also pass into Junin apprenticeship. It is up to you as Junin to decide whether the team you receive will be capable. Don't go easy on them. They are our future. One of those numbers may very well be our Hokage, and we cannot afford for them to be insufficient. Judge them harsh, and train them well. Dismissed. Team 7 will consist of Haruno Sakura, a pink-haired girl straightened up, crossing her fingers and whispering something to herself non-stop, Uchiha Sasuke, yada. The pink-haired girl exclaimed, as a dark-haired boy slammed his head onto the desk in front of him, and Uchiha Shinji. Your sensei is Hitaki Kakashi. Iruka informed the class. The boy named Sasuke, whose forehead was now slightly red, looked round at another dark-haired boy who was obviously Uchiha Shinji, grinning slightly. Shinji smiled back at Sasuke, giving him a wave. Sasuke let out a deep sigh of relief. I thought I was a goner. At least Shinji is good company. Sasuke thought to himself. Shinji was also a good ninja. Not quite at Sasuke's level, but he'd be a good sparring partner. Team 8 will consist of Aburame Shino, nobody in the room reacted. Hyuga Hinata. A rather timid-looking girl looked up at her name, quietly acknowledging her fate, and Inazuka Kiba. And Akamaru. A feral-looking boy piped up. Your sensei is Yuhi Kurenai. Iruka continued, despite the interruptions. Team 9 will consist of Hyuga Hikari. A pale-eyed girl furrowed her brows slightly. Uchiha Akane. Hyuga Hikari looked to the dark-haired girl sitting beside her, smiling at her friend, and Iruka paused, looking to the back of the room. Uzumaki Naruto. Yosh! Rang a voice from the back. Head upon head turned to the back of the room, as many people in the class exclaimed, Naruto passed. Naruto looked back at them irritably, but Iruka gathered everyone's attention again. Your sensei is Hyuga Aoi. Team 10 will consist of Akamichi Choji, Narashikamaru, and Yamanaka Ino. Your sensei is Sarutobi Asuma. Ah man, rang the voice of a blonde-haired girl who could only be Yamanaka Ino. I can't believe I'm stuck with these 2 losers. The boy sitting beside her grumbled at being called a loser, but didn't say anything back to her. And the last boy just kept eating his chips. Your senseis will be here to pick you up in an hour. I suggest you take the time to have a lunch with your teams. And lastly, Iruka paused, looking from one side of the room to the other. Do me proud as shinobi. I'm happy to say that I'm glad that I met each and every single one of you. Yes, Naruto, even you. Iruka said, smiling at them. Naruto pouted at being singled out, but smiled nonetheless. Despite being somewhat stiff to him early on in the year, Iruka had warmed up to Naruto since, and their relationship was now close enough that Naruto considered his sensei to be a good friend. And all the ramen that Iruka had treated him to didn't have too much to do with it. Really. Outside, Naruto wandered around lost in his thoughts. He had been so excited this morning that he had forgotten his lunch and now he regretted it. But regardless of that, he had finally made genin, and for some reason, he didn't feel as proud as he thought he would have been. Of course, Naruto could have made genin back when he was 6 years old, so it wasn't exactly hard. Maybe that was why he didn't feel like it was such a good accomplishment. Of course, he was still very happy, but Naruto thought that he was still at a high from the euphoria of finally accomplishing his goal for many years. Seals made from chakra. He called it the Fuuinjutsu technique, or the Seal Princess technique. It had been a harrowing task. Even with the Kage Bunshin chakra memory feedback training style, Naruto had just barely been able to do it. The biggest problem was that he was trying to force the chakra into a particular shape. Chakra control had no effect on it. However, since chakra was normally very fluid-like, it would very easily lose its shape, and it was practically impossible to just harden chakra outside of the body inside out. There was also the problem that hardened chakra was completely useless for using jutsu, unless you were planning to cut someone up with it. After about a year of trying to force his chakra into different shapes, Naruto had been forced to look at it a different way. How he would go about it though, he had no idea. And then, of course, ramen gave him the answer. He had stopped by Ichiraku Ramen one day, and had some ramen to go, the Ichiraku trademarks that Yugo had come up with. It was basically ramen in a container that could be taken along instead of eating it in the stand. And Naruto received his answer from that. Instead of hardening chakra from the inside out, he had to create a hardened shell and store the fluid like chakra inside, as if it were a container. The thin layer of hardened chakra would contain the regular chakra inside, and the chakra wouldn't lose its jutsu casting capacity nor would it fall out of place. And of course, the most important part was that it would form the shape of seals. Once Naruto had realized this, he also realized how seemingly impossible it would be to solidify his chakra into a thin container in the shape of a seal. Unlike his previous attempt, it did have a semblance of chakra control. And therein lay the problem. Having to make a single seal in this method was already a big problem. But even making a single seal wouldn't really allow him to make any others with ease automatically. There were hundreds upon hundreds of Fuuinjutsu seals that came in all sorts of sizes and shapes. Perhaps for the circular method there were less seals readily produced as it was very versatile, but he would still have to be able to single-handedly have to learn to form each seal. That would take him longer than he would probably live, even if he did manage to live to an old age like the Sandaime had. So he cheated. Putting their minds together, Naruto and Yugo designed a chakra control seal, which would regulate Naruto's chakra enough that should he ever form this seal while using any jutsu, his chakra would be perfectly controllable and be used at maximum efficiency per output without any waste. Or in other words, artificial perfect chakra control. As long as he first formed this seal in any sequence, Naruto would be able to form any others with much more ease. Not to mention the fact that he would be able to perform any jutsu flawlessly. Despite the fact that he had to always start with a control seal, Naruto was very happy with the results of his training even though his regular ninja training suffered for it. But he thought that it was well worth it. Besides, now that he was able to use Fuuinjutsu, he would be a better ninja than he most likely ever would be had he hadn't tried to create the technique. And there was the fact that Yugo would be so proud. He felt that making Yugo proud was enough reason for him to do it. "Oi, Naruto." Naruto looked up at the sound of his name. Grinning at him was his new teammate, Uchiha Akane. Behind her was his other teammate, Hyuga Hikari, who regarded him stoically. What is it?" Naruto asked, curious at what they wanted. "We thought that since we're going to be teammates, we should have lunch together," Akane said cheerfully. Naruto cheered up even more. "Oh, okay, let's go have some," but Naruto suddenly remembered he didn't have any lunch. "Ah, crap. I was in such a rush this morning that I didn't make any lunch." He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Akane's grin faltered slightly, but it picked up once more. "Don't worry about it. My aunt made more than I can eat alone, so you can share with me. Us dead lasts gotta stick together, Akane said, elbowing Naruto's side in good humor. Naruto would have resented the fact that she called him a dead last if it weren't for the fact that he actually was the dead last. After all, he couldn't expect anything else if he only barely went to class even once a week. "Doesn't your mom make you lunch?" Hikari asked, finally speaking. Naruto looked at her, but she didn't react in any way. "I'm an orphan," Naruto informed her, and neither of them reacted. It was a ninja village, orphans were to be expected. What about your foster parents? Akane asked this time, curious. She herself had lost her own parents fewer than 6 years ago in an infamous event known as the Uchiha Massacre. Don't got him, Naruto answered. Both girls frowned slightly at this. Though orphans were abundant in Konoha, in all ninja villages in fact, they were usually adopted into a family. Seeing an orphan that hadn't been adopted was rarer than seeing one who had. Wait, don't you have any parents? Akane questioned, genuinely confused. Naruto felt uncomfortable at the personal questioning, but before he could answer Hikari butted in. Akane, that's none of our business, she said, before turning to Naruto. Naruto, you can share lunch with us. Will you be coming? Sure, let's go, Naruto said, feeling happy that his teammates at least made the effort to be nice to him. Even now he didn't have many friends in the academy, and he didn't have any friends in his specific class. The majority of the class thought of and treated him as an idiot and a dead last, but he seemed to have lucked out with these teammates. As the trio made to leave, a figure blurred in front of them. All of them tensed at the speed this person seemed to possess, which was much greater than any of them could even think of achieving at the moment, and they only slightly relaxed when they realized that it was a Konoha shinobi. To be more specific, it was a Kunoichi Anbu, wearing a cat mask which did nothing to block the flowing violet hair from beautifully cascading out from around her. Naruto relaxed, realizing who it was, and his attention was drawn away to the box she was carrying in her hands. Yo, is that food? Naruto asked. Akane and Hikari blinked at the familiarity that Naruto showed with the Kunoichi Anbu. The Anbu chuckled and pulled off her mask, revealing her stunning face to the world. It was none other than Azuki Yugo. Is that all you care about? There's no, oh I'm glad to see you're back from your mission safe and sound, or even a hug for your Nichan whom you haven't seen for a whole week, Yugo said, pouting as she attached her mask to her belt. Hikari and Akane looked on in wonder. I said, yo, Naruto grumbled, now tell me, is that food? Yugo sighed, shaking her head in amusement. But she still handed him the box. Now what do you say? She asked playfully. I say, yay, food, Naruto replied cheekily in the process of opening the box. Yugo's hand blurred faster than any of the genin could react, and she held the box once again. I say thank you, Naruto pleaded, leaping for the lunchbox. Yugo gracefully tilted her body sideways, sticking her leg out, and Naruto went tumbling onto the ground, sending dust up into the air. Yugo held the lunchbox out tantalizingly. She said, in a thinking manner like Kakashi would always do. Naruto would surely get annoyed. Well, I guess you don't really want any food. Maybe I should just eat this barbecue chicken all by myself. Yugo, and Akane and Hikari as well, watched amusedly as Naruto leapt to his feet swiftly. His eyes zoned in on the lunchbox as if he had a Sharingan, and he brought his hands up to form a single hand seal. Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto called out, and Yugo blanched in shock as a single clone phased in beside him. Bunshin? That means, but Yugo couldn't finish her thought as Naruto's clone jumped at her. Her shock cost her as the clone suddenly gained a body and the real Naruto that had stayed back shimmered slightly as if it was the clone. The clone turned. Naruto grabbed the lunchbox from her outstretched hand and spun, protecting it with his body lest Yugo try to snatch it back, and he knew that she could. He chucked the lunchbox back at the other Naruto, who suddenly gained a body as he caught it, and the Naruto that had grabbed the lunchbox faded out of existence, as it were a clone all along. But Yugo didn't do anything but gaze at him with surprise. Naruto had been able to do Bunshin no Jutsu since he was just 7 years old. He had even managed to learn the exclusive Kawarimi variant of the technique which had been taught to him by the intruder, Jensei Motionise. However, as he got older, he found it harder and harder to be able to do the technique until it got to the point that he couldn't make a decent Bunshin at all, let alone a Kawarimi Bunshin. He hadn't known what was happening, but Kakashi explained to him that it was to be expected because his chakra was growing faster than his control of it. Naruto could have attempted to practice control, but that would mean constant and endless training in chakra control, so Naruto didn't make any attempt to learn chakra control exercises. For him to have used that technique meant that he had finally finished his technique. Meanwhile, Akane looked on in wonderment as the supposed dead last had managed to steal something from an Anbu who was apparently his big sister. Hikari's eyebrows were furrowed in confusion, but it was for a different reason. Unlike Akane and Naruto, she wasn't at the bottom of the class. She was actually quite high up. While other girls such as Haruno Sakura or Yamanaka Ino were beyond her level. Though she was sure that it was academically only, Hikari was no slouch. Akane, her best friend and an Uchiha, would have been the dead last if Naruto didn't hold that title. While Hikari truly admired Akane's kind and forgiving nature, which was also one of the reasons that the two of them were now best friends, Hikari knew that Akane would not see what she had just seen. When Naruto jumped to grab the lunchbox, Hikari was sure that it was the clone that had jumped. There was no dust scattered when he jumped, there was no noise of his sandals on the ground, typical signs of the Bunshin no Jutsu. But the clone was suddenly real as it grabbed the lunchbox and the real Naruto wasn't real anymore. And then it turned real once more while the clone that grabbed the lunchbox had faded away like a regular clone would. What in the world was that? Hikari's thoughts were interrupted when Yugo slowly spoke up. Naruto, that was the Bunshin no Jutsu. Yugo stated the obvious, to which Naruto nodded, grinning. You just did the Bunshin no Jutsu, which means. Yup. Naruto answered the unasked question. His grin didn't leave his face, even as Yugo shot at him. Hikari and Akane watched silently as Yugo enveloped him in a tight hug. When? Yugo asked. A day after you left, was Naruto's simple reply. Then I guess you're a genin now. Yugo chuckled as she released him. Naruto put his hands behind his head, one of them was still holding the lunchbox. Yeah, it's great, Naruto told her, grinning sheepishly. Yugo grabbed his chin and placed a moist kiss on his whiskered cheek, and whispered to him. I'm so proud of you, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto blushed at the praise and the kiss. Akane and Hikari grinned and smiled respectively at the touching scene. Kami, embarrass me in front of my teammates, why don't you? Naruto said in good humor. Teammates? Yugo asked, looking over at Akane and Hikari in confusion, at which both shifted around at the thought of an Enbuku no Ichi paying close attention to them. She looked back at Naruto, decidedly confused. Naruto, weren't you the dead last at the academy? Yugo asked. Naruto grumbled at her question. Yeah, but you don't have to be so blunt about it. Yugo ignored his discomfort. And who were the top two students? She asked. That bastard, Uchiha Sasuke, and his idiot fangirl, Haruno Sakura. Of all the people, it had to be those two losers. Naruto answered sourly, at which Akane punched his arm. Don't call my cousin a bastard. He's just a little, socially stupid. Akane said, scowling. Socially inept. Hikari corrected her. Yugo rubbed her chin in thought. I see. She looked back at Naruto's teammates, and bowed after saying, I apologize for my rudeness. My name is Azuki Yugo. It is a pleasure to meet you. I'm Uchiha Akane. It's so cool to meet such a successful kunoichi. What's Anbu like? How did you get there? And how exactly are you? Hikari interrupted Akane's endless verbal diatribe. My name is Hyuga Hikari. It's a pleasure to meet you as well, Yugo-san. Hikari said, bowing back at Yugo. Well, as much as I'd like to spend more time with all of you, I'm afraid that I have other business to take care of. Perhaps I can answer your questions another day, Akane-chan. Yugo said, smiling at the girls. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Akane said cheerfully. I look forward to it. Yugo said, well, take care, Akane-chan, Hikari-chan. And please watch after this little idiot. Yugo formed a hand seal and disappeared in a flurry of dust and leaves, having used the Shunshin no Jutsu. Will do. Akane yelled after her, looking at the direction that she went off in with starstruck eyes. Wow. Yugo-san. So cool. Well, let's go eat lunch. Naruto said excitedly, but just then, a bell went off in the academy. It was time to meet their sensei. Oh no. No. Naruto cried out in anguish, clutching his precious barbecue chicken to himself. Hikari chuckled, showing her amusement for the first time. It's okay Naruto, she said, putting her hand on his shoulder, we can eat later with our sensei. You'll be surprised at how easygoing she is. Yeah, Aoi is super cool. Akane said, I just know you'll be so surprised when you meet her. Team 2, Team 6, Team 4. Naruto watched as the newly appointed genin followed their newly appointed senseis out. Team 10, come here, a bearded man called out. As Shikamaru, Choji, and Ino went over to their sensei, Naruto regarded the Junin. He seemed vaguely familiar, but Naruto couldn't recall where from. "What's up, Naruto?" Akane asked. "Oh, I was just trying to remember where I've seen that guy before," Naruto answered. The Junin, who had yet to leave the room, felt Naruto's gaze and looked back at him. Naruto noticed that the Junin's gaze hardened when looking at him, so he averted his own. "You'd think after being so long in this village, people would stop looking at me like that," Naruto thought to himself sadly. "That's Sarutobi Asuma. He's the son of the Hokage," Hikari answered. Naruto suddenly remembered, he had seen him in a photo on the Hokage's desk. "Team 8, come here please." Naruto's eyes went straight to the origin of the pleasant voice. The sensei of Team 8 was certainly a beauty. Naruto thought back to the morning, trying to recall her name. What with everything that had happened since then, it was a bit hard. Yuhi? Kurenai? Naruto thought to himself. Naruto watched as Team 8 went over to their beautiful sensei. Shino seemed indifferent, though Naruto could never really tell with Shino anyway. Hinata, probably the weirdest and shyest girl in the class, though she was better than most, mainly because she wasn't a fangirl, looked strangely happy for some reason. And Kiba of course had a shit-eating grin on his face at the prospect of having such a hot babe as his sensei. The raven-haired woman looked at Naruto of her own volition. Naruto looked back, not knowing what to think. But soon enough, even her gaze gained that quality, the one that judged him unworthy. However, a loud voice interrupted their staring contest, as Kurenai blinked. "Alright, where's Team 9? Naruto looked to the source of that voice. His to-be sensei had the same Hyuga eyes as every other Hyuga, but that was where the similarities ended. She was definitely beautiful. Her skin tone was fairly darker than most Hyuga had, but it was still slightly paler than Naruto's. She looked almost like an older Hinata. However, what really stood out about her was her hair. It was extremely long, reaching all the way to her calves. But the uniqueness came in the fact that it was braided. Her clothing was untypical for a Hyuga as well. She wore a tank top and long shorts on top of fishnet on top of black spandex, which covered the whole body from neck to ankle. The only parts that were bare were her forearms, face, and feet. And, like Hikari, and unlike Hinata, her hite-8 was tied around her forehead. Needless to say, it was extremely unorthodox, not just for a Hyuga, but for a kunoichi as well. Hikari, Akane, and Naruto walked over to their new sensei, who looked over at them. As her eyes locked with Naruto's, she did something that he did not expect. "Kya, what the?" Naruto suddenly felt much heavier, as he looked up to see Aoi riding on his shoulders. He stumbled a bit at the sudden increase in weight, but quickly placed his feet apart in an attempt to regain balance, but it was to no avail. As both sensei and student went tumbling to the ground, Aoi spun around acrobatically so that she would end up underneath him, meeting face to face. They hit the ground with a loud thud, with Naruto's body pressing on top of Aoi's. "Oh, so bold. Please Naruto-sama, take me." Aoi gasped out in a luscious voice. Was Naruto's only reply. The people remaining in the room watched the two in shock. Well, Akane said weakly, recovering from her shock, "I told you she'd surprise you." Hikari's face met palm. "Okay, well, I know you too," Aoi said, indicating Akane and Hikari, "and Naruto-sama, I know you too. You two know me, but Naruto-sama should too know me, so let's let both of us twos introduce ourselves, so we can know everybody." Naruto looked up at her. She was still riding on his shoulders. She had insisted that he carry her around and wouldn't remove herself from that position. "Hikari, you start. Names, likes, dislikes, goals, dreams." Aoi ordered the girl. The girl in question sighed, but obeyed. "My name is Hyuga Hikari, 12 years old. I like flowers and spending time with my friends. I also tolerate Aoi." Hikari started, at which Aoi pouted in indignation. "I dislike people who discriminate others because they believe themselves to be better. I don't have any particular goals for the future, but my dream is to be with my friends." As Hikari presented herself, Naruto took the time to observe her. Like every Hyuga, Hikari had the milky white eyes that were their trademark dujutsu, the Byakugan. Her dark brown hair was long, reaching to the middle of her back, but was cut short at the front, bangs resting on her hite-8, which was tied around her forehead. She wore pale white clothing as was the norm for most Hyugas. She also had a quiet air of confidence, but there was nothing that really identified her apart from the rest of the clan, except for a pink hairclip that stood out. "Akane, you next." The girl in question grinned. "Yo, my name is Uchiha Akane. I like Hikari-chan, Aoi, Hinata-chan, Hanabi-chan, my brother Shinji, my aunt Makoto, my cousin Sasuke-kun, the legendary Tsunade-sama, Hokage-sama, the guy who brings us milk bottles every day. What was his name? The girl who..." Akane listed off in rapid fire, but one of Aoi's braids suddenly reached out and whipped her head. "Ow. Okay. I dislike people who put others down for their own pleasure, and my goal is to unlock my Sharingan and to show everyone that I can also become an awesome kunoichi." Akane had jet black eyes and hair like most Uchiha did, but her hair was cropped, and only reached down to her shoulders. She wore a dark half-sleeve shirt and off-white long shorts. Her shirt had the Uchiha clan symbol on the back. Naruto thought that her clothing was almost an imitation of Sasuke's, though he had to admit that Akane was much more pleasant to look at. "Alright, I'll go next," Aoi said exuberantly. "My name is Hyuga Aoi. My likes? Well, I love Naruto-sama, and I like envisioning what our kids would look like." Naruto didn't know how to react. "I dislike the rule that stops senseis from betting their students. My goal for the future is to christen Naruto-sama's Chunin vest, and my dream for the future is to marry and give Naruto-sama as many kids as he wants." Aoi exclaimed, grinning perversely. "Okay, now the best for last. Go ahead, Naruto-sama." Aoi exclaimed. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I'm 12 years old, and the things I like. My friends and the people I consider to be my family. And my favorite food is ramen, and my favorite color is orange." Naruto proclaimed. Aoi rubbed her chin in thought. Orange EH? Naruto definitely did love orange, and his clothing reflected that. Both his vest and shorts were orange, and he wore a blue t-shirt underneath his vest, and blue sandals. He had previously swapped out the regular cloth on his Hite-8 for a longer blue one that reached out all the way to his shoulders. "I dislike people that discriminate against others for no reason, and the time I have to wait for ramen to cook. My goal for the future is to save as many friends as I can, and," he said, remembering Naruto, and then he grinned, "my dream is to one day become a fine ninja of this village. To become Hokage. Then my new goal is to christen Naruto-sama's Hokage robes." Aoi piped up immediately. "Aoi, how about being serious and telling us what we're supposed to do next now that we're genin?" Hikari spoke up. "Kami, what a killjoy." But at the look on Hikari's face, Aoi complied. She flipped off of Naruto's shoulders, finally, and turned to face all three genin. Fine. Aoi's voice took on a serious tone. "The genin title that you hold currently is a fake." All three 12-year-olds looked at her in surprise. Aoi smirked in understanding. "Yeah, that's right. You three are currently genin by Academy standards. But the Academy standards comply with what the non-shinobi civilians consider to be ninja, and that's all due to the politics between shinobi and non-shinobi citizens. To truly be a ninja by the standard of being a hidden village, there's another test you have to pass, given to you by your Junin sensei. Only then will you be truly considered a genin of Konoha." Aoi explained. "What's this other test?" Akane asked, oddly quiet. "It varies from Junin sensei to Junin sensei, but it's always a combat test. I'm going to tell you three straight up. You have to prove that you have what it takes to work together as a team. Other Junin will probably try to let their genin figure this out by themselves, but I want to go the direct route. But don't think I'm taking it easy on you. Since when do you ever take it easy on us?" Hikari asked, amused. Aoi ignored her comment. "The other Junin won't interfere with their genin, just to see if they will come together on their own. Instead, I'm going to actively try to prevent you from working together. I'll be trying to split you up. It'll be harder on you three than most teams. So you're giving us the hardest test?" Akane asked, looking subdued, which was a far outcry from her usually outgoing, happy-go-lucky behavior. Well, your test will be harder than most. But be glad you didn't get Hitaki Kakashi as your sensei. His test is always the hardest, and he hasn't passed even a single team yet." Aoi said. "What about you, Aoi-sensei?" Naruto asked. "How many teams have you passed?" "Actually, you three are my first team. And I really hope you pass." Aoi answered, winking at Naruto. Naruto gulped. "Anyway, out of all the graduating classes, Each class will only have 3 teams that will pass. Except for your class. Your class gets 4 teams that graduate. To tell you the truth, the exception was made because your class shows the most promising shinobi that Konoha has seen in quite a while. Aoi further explained. So, I think I've given you enough information. Your combat test starts tomorrow at 0900 hours. Be at Training Ground 9. Make sure to eat a good breakfast, and be prepared. You'll need to be ready against me. Aoi informed them. Now, you 3 are officially dismissed. Unofficially, however. Aoi grinned, and jumped on Naruto's back, her arms encircling his chest and her cheek resting against his. Naruto fumbled slightly at the movement, but he was more prepared this time. His arms instinctively caught her legs, and the result was Naruto giving a piggyback to a woman twice his size. Take me home, Naruto-sama. Take me home and have your way with me. Akane suddenly clenched her fist in front of her. I won't lose to you, Naruto. Let's race. Hikari, get on. Hikari sighed yet again, but amazingly clambered onto the slightly larger Akane's back. Come on Naruto-sama, don't lose to these undeveloped little girls. Aoi yelled out. Oh, it's so on. Akane shouted back. Naruto looked at his new team in amazement. He hadn't been sure exactly what he was looking for in a team. To be truthful, he wasn't looking forward to being in a team at all. Even though he was barely ever in class, nobody had approached him anyway. He didn't have any friends in the whole graduating year, let alone his own class. But his team wasn't like anything he expected. His sensei was, or pretended to be, completely and madly in love with him, and her life's dream was to bed him. One of his teammates was a fellow dead last that was so outgoing that she seemed to like everyone she met, regardless of them being complete strangers. And his last teammate was the voice of reason in the team, one that could control even their sensei. Yet she also seemed to have a fun-loving side. If today was any indication, Naruto felt that he would have a lot of fun with this team. So he threw away all his reservations and inhibitions, and let loose. Okay, let's go, Naruto shouted. Aoi whooped and hollered from his back. Akane wiped her nose confidently, and Hikari tightened her grip. Both runners crouched to the starting position, and Aoi already began giving Naruto directions. And the race was on. As the wind rushed past his face, Naruto smiled. Yeah, it'll be fun. That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.